I'll call the meeting to order. This is the December 10th, 2013 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Association. We'll now go into our executive session. Before we start, I think this is the first meeting with a newly comprised commission. I just want to welcome Mark Corcoran, Jackie Coleman, and Meg Francis to the commission. Those are our 7 new commissioners, and 3 new commissioners, and the 7 of us were all on the previous term. So welcome to all 3 of you. The first order of business, and again, learn how, since we have 7 regular members here today, the executive session will deliberate, unless somebody recuses themselves, we'll deliberate it amongst the 7 of us. So really, the alternates won't have a chance probably today unless somebody recuses themselves to speak during the executive session. But we go to the public hearing, you know, you can ask questions as freely as anybody else, just follow the lead of everybody else. So in executive session, we're restricted, only 7 members can deliberate on things. So unfortunately, everybody showed up tonight, so it made the math easy. Thank you. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the minutes from November 12, 2013. Do I have a motion? Motion approved by Commissioner Jacobson, second by Commissioner Alessi. Any discussion or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of November 12, 2013, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one is opposed. The minutes are approved unanimously. Now we'll start our organizational meeting, which the town requires us to do every year, once a year, and we'll start with the election of officers. I will start the process by requesting any nominations for chairman. Yes, Commissioner Jacobson.
I'd like to nominate Matt Wagner.
And I'll second it.
I'd like to nominate Matt Wagner.
I'm going to second him.
Okay, Matt Wagner's name has been put into nomination made by Commissioner Jacobson, seconded by Commissioner Neely. Are there any other names to put into nomination? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Really, you're voting for candidates here, so it's not really aye or nay, but we'll still answer aye or anyone else. So all in favor of Matt Wagner as our chairman, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one is opposed. Matt is the new chairman. You probably don't need to use that yet.
Couldn't pass it fast enough. Yeah.
There you go.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Jacobson, Commissioner Neely, and everyone else. I appreciate your vote of confidence, and hopefully I can do as good a job as former Chair Barrett's. And thank you very much for all your service as Chair of the Commission. I really appreciate that. So next order of business will be a call for nominations for a Vice Chair. Do I have any nominations?
Yes, I will nominate Jerry Alessi for vice chairman.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jacobson. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chair? No? Hearing none. We'll call for a vote. All in favor of Commissioner Alessi as Vice Chairman, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Commissioner Alessi is now Vice Chairman of the Commission.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
And if I have to do any meetings, I hope Commissioner Barrett to
I'm sure it'll be fine. Next order of business will be for Secretary. Do I have any nominations, Commissioner Alessi?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Barrett for Secretary.
Commissioner Barrett, and any seconds?
I would like to second him.
There's been a second by Commissioner Neely. Any other nominations for Secretary? No. Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor of Commissioner Barrett as Secretary of the Commission, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Commissioner Barrett, congratulations on becoming Secretary.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. All set? Excellent. We'll move on to next order of business in Bills and Communications, item 1C, the matter of 2047 Post Road. It's a request of Consumers Petroleum.
Just wanted to get the act on and approve the schedule of meetings.
Schedule of meetings, thanks. Everyone should have in their packet a revised schedule of meetings for 2014. Is there any discussion on this item? Everybody
September
okay?
9th is not, that's not Labor Day. Is that Labor Day weekend, September 9th? That's
No.
Tuesday? Okay.
We tried to clear all the dates. I looked on my calendar, I didn't see any holidays. Commissioner Keneally, good? All right. No further discussion. We have a vote. All,
Make a motion.
motion to approve?
To approve.
All right.
Second.
Mr. Calabrese, second by Commissioner Alessi. Any further discussion? All in favor of the meeting schedule for 2014 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? No, the meeting schedule carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item of business is 1C, 2047 Post Road, request of Consumers Petroleum for 100% release of a $43,205 bond pertaining to a special exception improvements in the design commercial district.
This is a newly reconstructed gas station and convenience store on the corner of Post Road and South Pine Creek Road, approved by this commission a couple of years ago. Site work has been completed. It's up and functional. You have a report in your packet from our engineering department recommending 100% release, and we concur with that recommendation.
Make the motion approved?
Second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi, second by Commissioner Calabrese. Is there any discussion on the item? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor of the release of bond in the amount of $43,205, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 1D, Mill Hill Terrace and Carriage Drive. It's the request of Feber Group for a 50% release of a $460,720.50 bond pertaining to subdivision improvements in a AA zone.
This is an 18-lot subdivision that was approved by this commission several years ago. It's now under construction. If you've been by there, you see activity. There's about 3 houses under construction presently. If you travel in the area of Mill Hill Road over the last 6 months or so, you have been detoured because of sewer work that was going on in the road there. The new roads have been paved, the first course of pavement. There is a second course to come, but you will see a report in your packet from the engineering department that 50% of the bonded work has been done. The majority of that is drainage infrastructure in the road that's all been installed in the first course of pavement. So they concur that more than 50% of the work is done. So we are recommending a 50% release.
So the just to be clear, the full amount of the bond was $921,441. The $460,720.50 is the 50%, right?
No. That the 460,720 is the full amount of the bond. So it would be a 50% release of that amount.
Okay. I have the cover email from Walter Stacy. This is total bond.
Yes, I stand corrected. I was incorrect there. We do have a letter of credit in the amount of the 921, so 50%. You are correct, Mr. Chairman. 467.20 and 50 cents. The 50 cents should tip me off. You are correct.
Okay, very good. Can I have a motion?
I'll move for a 50% release of the bond of $921,441, so the 50% would be the amount in the note, or $460,000.
Second. Okay. Moved by Commissioner Barrett and second by Commissioner Niley. Any further discussion? No? All right. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Okay, the next item on our agenda is new applications to recommend a public hearing. The first item is 2A, 8090 Kings Highway Cutoff, special exception and special permit application of Country Realty Company and Anthus Corporation pertaining to the construction of an automobile service facility in a designed commercial district.
This property is 80 Kings Highway Cutoff is the existing Lexus service facility. 90 Kings Highway Cutoff is the former diner property that Lexus has acquired or is contracted to purchase. This application that does require hearing anticipates the demolition of the former diner building and the construction of an addition to their service facility.
Any motions?
I'll move it to public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Barrett, second by Commissioner Jacobson. Any discussion on the item? No? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 1280 Stratfield Road. It says special exception application of Child's World Academy to establish a day nursery in an existing building in a neighborhood design business district. On for recommendation of public hearing.
Yes, this is the former Stratfield IGA market. Charles World Academy is looking to establish a daycare facility within the existing building. It is a special exception use and does require a public hearing.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Alessi makes a motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Any discussion on the item? No? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item on our agenda is old business. We have one item for discussion tonight. This is 600 Hoydens Lane. It's a subdivision application of AFM Properties LLC for 2 lots in a AAA zone. We had public hearings on October 22nd and November 12th, 2013. Expires January 16th, 2014. Present at the hearings were Barrett, Alessi, Jacobson, Keneally, Wagner, Calabrese on October 22nd, and Commissioner Neely. Commissioner Calabrese, did you watch the video?
I did. I watched the Fair TV.
Okay.
Yep, caught up to speed.
All right. So you're all up to speed and ready to go.
Yep.
So I think we have a full complement of commissioners on this item.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you a brief overview of what was presented at the hearing. The property is located on the north side of Hoydens Lane. The site comprises of approximately 4.19 acres and is in a residential AAA zone, which, as you know, the minimum lot area in that zone is 2 acres. And the site is sloped from east to west. The site contains an existing residence and outbuildings and is surrounded by some woods and lawn area. The proposal involves subdividing the property into 2 lots, one containing the existing residence and the other becoming a new building lot. As part of the development of the building lot, 2 underground detention systems would be installed for roof and driveway areas. And as you remember, that was presented and outlined at the hearing. The proposed Lot A with the existing residence would be 2.059 acres, and the proposed Lot B would have a net area of 2.017 acres. The total area of the lot would be 2.133 acres. Of course, a portion of that would have to be subtracted for the access way that goes out to the main road. And then wetland permit approval was granted on August 2nd, 2013 for the lot division. A stopping site distance analysis was performed and submitted for review for the proposed access drive. The report was represented to the commission and concluded at the hearing that based on the comparison of the available stop site distance on both approaches to the proposed driveway, adequate distance was provided or is provided at each direction. This report was reviewed by the town engineering department as well as a drainage report, and the department felt that the proposal met with the requirements for each subject. Since the total land area of the split lot exceeds 4 acres, this required that we consider our section 2.3 open space of the subdivision regulations. As was discussed at the hearing, in our section 2.310 entitled exemptions, it states that this section would not apply to those subdivisions exempt by section 8-25 of the state statutes. This is a section of the statutes that gives local planning and zoning commissions their authority to deal with subdivisions as well as other things. The section section 525 subdivision of land states in part that open space requirements shall not apply if the transfer of land in a subdivision of less than 5 parcels is to a family relative for no consideration. The applicant represented to the commission that Mary and Anthony Wellner, who basically is AFM Properties LLC, would quit claim to Elaine Wellner, the proposed lot, subject to the commission's approval of this subdivision. Essentially, what the commission was asked to rule on is whether or not they felt an LLC, albeit essentially being the mother and father of the person that the property is going to be transferred to, met the intent of the section 2.5 exemption. If that is not true, the commission does not agree that the transfer meets these requirements of the state statute for exemption, then for various reasons outlined by the applicant is would request payment of open space in lieu. That value, based on the assessed value of the property, that payment would be $58,220. And that essentially, Mr. Chairman, was represented at the public hearing.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have a motion on this item? Anyone?
I'll move to approve. Discuss it.
Second it.
Okay. Motion to approve by Commissioner Barrett and a second by Commissioner Neely. Open for discussion. Who would like to start?
Okay, I'll start. I think not to cover all the issues or questions of the application, but the first one on the open space requirement, since I spoke on that, I'm of the opinion, I'd like to hear what the other commissioners has to say, that this LLC holds the title, and that doesn't really meet the intent of the exemption, which was, families dividing lands for sons, daughters, or parents, whatever. I understand that the people that own it or not, but it's an LLC, so I don't believe it meets the intent of the exemption. I also saw evidence on the record that I was aware of and that the Attorney Fitzpatrick provided, that the commission has taken a fee in lieu of the open space in all cases for the past 16 or so years where it was in the AAA zone, and not only did it not meet the open space objectives, but they did not have enough land they didn't have the 10%. So he provided us about 7 cases. I was familiar with some of them. A lot of them were older. There was only one of recent vintage, but I'd be happy to be persuaded otherwise. But I'm of the opinion that the history of action of this commission is that in those cases we do take the fee in lieu of open space. We don't deny the subdivision because they don't have, in effect, 4.4 acres, which could have been one interpretation of our regulations. So that's how I would just speak on that issue, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I
Commissioner
believe,
Lissie?
yeah, I believe, I concur with Commissioner Barrett that the town should take the fee in lieu of. I'm not happy about the situation. Well, I don't think it meets family member passing on to family member when we're going from corporation to corporation. So, as far as I'm concerned, I think we should take the fee. If that's the only way that I could see myself voting to approve this.
Anyone else? Calabrese?
Yeah, I agree with both the other commissioners that have spoken so far. The LLC, in my opinion, does not meet the intent of the exemption, and the town should take the fee in lieu.
Commissioner Jacobson?
I agree with the other commissioners. I think that we should take the fee.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Yeah, I agree. Clearly, the statute's not met here. I mean, it wasn't individuals, even if you could suggest that LLCs would meet that requirement. There were sort of backdated or trying to provide the quitclaim deeds in order to, sort of shoehorn into that. It didn't meet the statute. It doesn't meet the statute. But the interpretation of the regulations historically has been to accept the fee in lieu. In this particular case, I did not have the experience of working on any of those prior applications, but what does persuade me in this particular case is that the fee in lieu requirements are met here. There would not be a good dedication of the space. So, as a foundation for taking the fee, I do believe that they've met the requirements under the regulations. So, in all other respects, I think the application meets our regulations, and I think that we should approve it on that basis. Those are my thoughts. Any further discussion?
Were there any other conditions, does anybody remember at the public hearing? I mean, that obviously would be a condition that we take the fee in lieu.
Yeah.
We have the standard subdivision conditions.
Yeah, there were two very minor things recommended by the engineering department plus our standard.
Which we would include.
And there was a percentage that was determined in the fee of this?
Yeah, the fees has been determined. Staff commented that.
$58,220.
$58,000.
Right, there's a calculation on the excess pre-subdivision acreages, I think, what it's based on. So I would just want to amend my motion to include all the standard subdivision conditions, as well as the engineering recommendations, as well as accepting the fee in lieu of.
And Commissioner Alessi?
Second that
All right.
motion.
So the motion as amended is to approve the application with conditions as we discussed. It's been made and seconded. No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Okay, the next item on our agenda is under compliances, 4A. This is in the matter of 210 Sasco Hill Road, a coastal site plan application of Jonathan Wooten to authorize the retention of an existing seawall located landward of the high tide line constructed in 2002. The application is being made pursuant to a consent agreement between the applicant and the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and this is in a AAA zone.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is a unique application only in that we're discussing work that was done 11 years ago, not necessarily the nature of the work that was done, but the fact that here we are 11 years after the fact. What happened here was this applicant and homeowner pursued the construction of this series of terraced walls to address an erosion condition on their property, and hopefully you've had a chance to review the voluminous materials and photos that were on that were submitted with the application. There was a local wetland permit issued at the time. We were aware of the application at the time. It was our opinion that it did not require a coastal site plan review at that time, since we considered the wall to be above the high tide line. There has been some evolution in the jurisdiction line that the state DEEP has and our jurisdiction line that's changed somewhat over the years, but what happened here is construction ensued. The project was completed. There was a notice of violation served on the property owner by DEP that has kind of sat there for 10 years or so. That they originally opined that they being the state, opined that the wall was built below the high tide line, therefore it had to be removed. The applicant disagreed with that. Nothing really happened for a period of about 10 years. What triggered this is the house, the property is for sale. Prospective purchaser on a search of the land records discovered the notice of violation, which then, of course, led to the desire to rectify that. The applicant, in this case, with the information that you have reviewed, has successfully convinced the DEP that he is correct, that the wall is actually above the high tide line, not below the high tide line, so that the only violation that really, in fact, occurred was there was a small area of tidal wetlands that was disturbed as part of that construction. They've come to a consent agreement to resolve that. A fine has been levied upon that property owner, and in retrospect, in dealing with the DEP, we should have, at the time, required a coastal site plan review. We did not, and it wasn't because, I just want to make clear that it wasn't because the applicant was avoiding us. We opined at the time that that wasn't required. Had it been, our concern for the site would be the same as it would be now, that at the end of the day, that there be, the tidal vegetation has an opportunity to flourish there, and if you look at the after pictures, that's in fact what has happened here, that the construction at the end of the day has accomplished the goals that it set out to do, that it's stabilized the site from further erosion, and there has been the establishment of tidal wetland grasses there that are flourishing. So the state has agreed, and we agree, that it would be a far worse environmental disturbance of the site at this point to go back and remove it and start anew. So there's been a consent agreement reached with the state and the private property owner, and as a condition of that agreement, it requires them to make this coastal site plan application now, retroactively, which we should have required 11 years ago, but at the end of the day, the finished product is one that we think represents what our concerns would have been for the site and would have recommended approval at the time had there been an application made. So that is the staff position on the matter.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Jacobs.
I'd like to make a motion that this be scheduled for a public hearing.
Okay. So do we have, well, is there a second for that motion? Yeah, I don't know why it would be
A lot of
necessary.
questions I have.
You do? I'll second it.
Thank you.
All right. Any discussion on the motion to have a public hearing on this application? Well,
I would need to hear why you
Yeah.
that's it.
I have a, yes, I just didn't know how much I could say without having freedom of information or something.
well,
11
we have, I mean, the matter is now under discussion after we have a motion and a second to move the item for a public hearing. And you now have an opportunity to explain why you think
Okay.
that is necessary, because it's not required, it's a compliance application.
I reviewed all the material, and it was very complex, and I do have questions. First of all, it's 11 years old, and the laws have changed since 2001, and no other commission has, I checked, and no other commission has seen a conservation commission, and who's in charge? There's no jurisdiction over it. Basically, I'd like another, commission to see it. The laws have changed since 2001. And I don't know who's in charge of it, who's got jurisdiction. I really think it warrants a public hearing.
Is there any other discussion on this item, being to move it to public hearing?
Have you had any discussions with the state as far as where it is today and meets all the compliances?
Yeah, their original position when the work was ongoing was they felt that it was below the high tide line. That was the big debate and discussion between the state and the applicant. Was this wall, the lower of the walls, the closest to the water, above or below the high tide line? Had it been below the high tide line, the state would have insisted on its removal, and at the end of the day, they agreed with the applicant that the construction was not below the high tide line, therefore it can stay. So the state is in agreement with the applicant that it can stay. With respect to jurisdiction, the fact that they've now granted this consent order, they would have had jurisdiction over it. It's really dual jurisdiction here, the state of Connecticut and us now from a coastal site plan perspective, because this is considered by the state to be a shoreline flood and erosion control structure, that it does have, does merit a coastal site plan application before this commission, and that is the application that's before you now.
I still feel that I would feel better. This was written by the applicant. I don't know his credentials. I was told that he just started to do this without getting any permits or any permission. And he was fined by the state.
So,
And that's still pending. I have a lot of questions. I'm not saying I want to prove it, but I have a lot of clarifications I want to have.
any other discussion?
I can just talk to the public hearing question.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
the only thing
right,
that's
the only
open.
question, right,
That's what's
right,
on
and
the
that-
table
that,
right now.
You know, as far as who has jurisdiction, I think the staff answered that we do. To hear coastal site plans, we didn't hear one. This all goes to why we should or shouldn't have it. Typically, if we get a coastal site plan, the only ones that I've seen go to public hearing are ones that are in conjunction with a special permit or a special exception, something like that, not necessarily for a residential, retaining wall or something like that. So I think the only reason that I could see to move it to public hearing, Commissioner Jacobs and anything else, is if you have questions that you feel were not sufficiently answered in the flash drive that we received of all that, and if there's questions you'd like to direct to the applicant, then that would be the reason I would see for myself to have a public hearing, not for the jurisdiction. Again,
That's fine.
I looked at the documents and I thought they were fairly comprehensive, and that the DEP, came up with a consent agreement on them. But yeah, I mean, if there's a reason and questions you want to ask, that I think would be the rationale for the public hearing.
I would like to ask some questions.
Right.
Yes.
My view is that no public hearing is necessary or required. I spent a lot of time with all the materials. They were quite exhaustive. And, the principle of the situation was that the DEP thought in the first instance that the wall was being built below the high tide line, when in fact now, be it years later, they have approved the construction and are of the opinion that it's above the high tide line. And there was some removal of material in the process of construction for which they've levied a fine. And they've now approved the entire project, and as a condition of their consent agreement, are requiring a retroactive coastal site plan application to come before us. And the DEP has opined. At one point, they wanted the wall removed. I mean, that was in the materials. At one point, the DEP ordered the removal of the wall, and they've changed their mind. They have now set, a formal opinion and entered a consent agreement that the wall is proper, it's above the high tide line, and that, they're no longer requiring its removal. So I thought the materials presented were exhaustive. The jurisdiction question, I think, while in the first instance was perhaps ambiguous, has now been resolved, and I personally don't see this ripe for a public hearing. And in addition, I agree with Commissioner Barrett that, this isn't of the type of sort of situation that we've historically requested a public hearing. So those are my views.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to emphasize one thing here. This isn't a situation where this applicant just went off on his own and avoided the town's review of this. We were aware of it at the time and opined, in retrospect, incorrectly at the time that it didn't need a coastal site plan at the time of construction. Had we felt differently, that application would have been made then. It was our opinion that it did not, since it was above the high tide line. That proved to be the wrong call at the time. But at the end of the day, what that wall was set out to do has been accomplished, and I think I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't the impression here that this applicant just went off and got away with it and didn't, and now is only having to do this after the fact. He presented himself to the town, and and we are somewhat in the mix here in terms of why that application wasn't made in the first place.
Any further discussion or questions for staff on the motion, which again is on the table for public hearing? The motion that's been made is to move the item not for approval, but for public hearing. Any further discussion on that? Okay. I'll call for a vote. A yay vote is to move to public hearing. A no vote is to deny for public hearing, after which, if it's denied for public hearing, we'll then consider the item if there is a motion to approve or deny. All right? So, all in favor of the motion to move the item to public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. The motion is defeated. Commissioner Jacobson voting yay and all the rest voting no. So now, the motion having been defeated, the item remains on our agenda. And having the staff review, does anyone have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Alessi moves to approve.
I'll second.
Commissioner Calabrese moves to, seconds the motion. Motion on the table now is to approve the compliance application. Is there any further discussion? Anybody have any more questions for staff? And I think we fairly discussed the substance,
I have no
of the
further
application. No further comments from staff? All right. So now the motion on the table is to approve the item. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? No.
No.
Commissioner Jacobson votes no. All the rest of the commissioners voting yes. The motion carries.
Okay.
Hold on, I gotta get my agenda. Where's my agenda? I think that's the last item.
Yeah.
That's the last item on our executive session agenda. So we'll just take a brief recess to reconfigure the room for public hearing. Call the meeting back to order. So this is a public hearing. First item on our agenda is 893 Sasco Road, re-subdivision application of Bernard and Cynthia McDonald for 2 lots in a AAA zone. This is a continued hearing from November 12th, 2013. At that hearing, we heard from the applicant, we had public comment, and now we're in the applicant's rebuttal. Just for the benefit of the public.
Microphones, please.
Got it? Closer. Is that better? You're welcome. So for the benefit of the public, this is a little bit of a different procedure because we're not having necessarily public comment in this particular application again. So without further ado, Attorney Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for the record, my name's Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey, and Bologna. We have offices at 1735 Post Road. I'm here tonight representing the applicants, Bernard and Cynthia McDonald. We're pleased to have the opportunity to offer rebuttal in this matter and hopefully conclude this hearing. The applicant will offer evidence to rebut the arguments made by Attorney Green on behalf of the opponents. I will then offer a summation in rebuttal, as is normally the case. The applicants are aware of the chair's decision at the meeting of November 12, and will limit the rebuttal evidence to the issues raised by the opposition. The specific issues raised by the opposition as contained in my notes are off-site traffic on Sasco Hill Road, property values, the possibility of other subdivisions on Sasco Hill Road, and the provisions of Section 2.1.10 regarding the dedication of land to establish an abutting right-of-way of 50 feet. The applicant will submit an alternate plan confirming that the applicants can comply with the 50-foot right-of-way requirement if necessary. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to first introduce Mr. Michael Vitterla to address the 50-foot right-of-way issue.
Thank you. One moment, Mr. Patrick. Yes.
Chairman, if I may. Consistent with Attorney Fitzpatrick, once again, for the record, Joel Green representing Sasco Hill Neighborhood Association and Jeffrey Rubin. Consistent with Attorney Fitzpatrick's remarks, this is rebuttal as I understood it, and I think the Chair and the Commission was clear. This is rebuttal this evening. Mr. Fitzpatrick's suggestion that he would be offering a new plan or an alternative plan, I would submit is not appropriate by way of rebuttal. That, as I understand it, would constitute new material or a new application and one that has not been previously filed with the Commission, and I would object to that on behalf of my clients and request that the Commission not permit, once again, new material as I understood it. This is rebuttal. That is the claims that we raised regarding infirmities in the application. As I understand, rebuttal would be that our position is incorrect, that there are, that the present application does meet the regulations, does have the information which we claim was missing, or addressing claims of defects in the application. But this is not, as I understand it, under the rules that guide this Commission, an opportunity to offer new materials.
Well, we have been handed a letter just now. Are you familiar with the letter that was just handed out?
I went to the zoning department this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I did see a letter dated today from Attorney Fitzpatrick to the Commission, now seeking, as I understand it, a waiver of certain requirements of the subdivision regulations.
All right, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we let Attorney Fitzpatrick make his presentation, have a couple of questions about the letter as well, and we'll see where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And
Mr. Chairman, I would like to address the issue of the opportunity to offer that plan. Would you like to hear that now or after Mr. Vitterla presents it?
that would be fine. I do have a question about the letter, though, because I did look in my packet in preparation for tonight, and I didn't have any material, so I didn't really expect to see anything. But your letter refers to plans submitted to the Commission on this date. And
I mean tonight.
tonight, like now?
Correct.
Okay, so we haven't seen that as
No.
of yet.
That's correct.
So maybe you want to address that then,
All right.
because it is a little
2 points primarily, Mr. Chairman. Number one, the opposition stated that this application should be denied because the imposition of the 50-foot right-of-way, which they deemed appropriate, would reduce the required lot areas below 2 acres. That's not the case. And certainly, at a minimum, the applicant should have the opportunity to offer rebuttal evidence to prove that that's a misstatement of fact. The applicant can accomplish the dedication of a 50-foot right-of-way sufficient to establish that 50 feet from one side to the other and still maintain 2 conforming lots. That's the plan you're going to see. Secondly, I would submit the applicant has the absolute right to submit an alternate plan that addresses the primary issue, which was raised by the opposition. It's not a new plan. It's an alternate. Ironically enough, it was in the case cited by Attorney Green to the Commission, that McKenzie case, that I mentioned the fact that that applicant submitted a revised plan. The case states that at the second public hearing, Attorney Raymond Rizzio explained that the original plan was filed with the understanding that the Commission would exercise its authority to modify the regulation pertaining to landscaping and parking. You remember, Attorney Green submitted it relative to the right to waive regulations. It's not relevant to our issue tonight on the subdivision regulations because that was a zoning regulation. But in any event, that case further states, quote, given the concerns raised during the public hearing 1 month earlier, Rizzio also submitted what he described as an alternate plan that satisfies all the requirements of the DBI zone, end quote. That case, which is an appellate court case, raises no issue as to the legal right of the applicant to submit an alternate plan that addressed issues raised in an earlier public hearing. That's an October 15, 2013 appellate court opinion. And the plaintiff's attorney was Kevin Gumper, who is, quite frankly, a very, very good land use attorney.
Was there an objection in that case
The
raised?
issue was never even raised.
Right, so the issue of whether the public either could have an opportunity to consider and comment on that new evidence was not litigated in that case.
In that case, the applicant submitted an alternate plan at the second public hearing to address the issues raised at the first public hearing, and despite the fact it was a contested appeal, the opposition never even raised the issue.
Okay, let me ask you this, because we may be able to sort of cut to the chase. Do you have any objection to the public, after you're done with your presentation and submitting whatever it is that you have to submit, having an opportunity to consider that and commenting?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not.
Then Attorney Green, why don't we hear Attorney Fitzpatrick's presentation? If at the end of that presentation you still would like an opportunity to consider the evidence, then we'll take it from there. Sure.
Am I to understand then that Mr. Fitzpatrick proposes to offer a new plan this evening that alters the layout and configuration of the two
Well,
properties?
you know, what he has said is that he intends to offer an alternate plan, and he's recited case law establishing his purported right to do that, and then it would be up to us to determine whether or not he is entitled to do that.
I think that Attorney Fitzpatrick is taking a liberal view of McKenzie for the authority of allowing additional evidence in this instance, where the public hearing and the public had not finished its comment, where the matter was still open, and while it was in response, public comment had not. It's in a different context completely, and I don't think it's authority for that. But if Attorney Fitzpatrick is suggesting that he's now going to submit an alternative plan that has a new layout, that hasn't gone through the vetting process that applications go through in terms of review through the various town officials and
Well, we don't know that. We don't know
Well,
whether or not
I
the plan
suppose-
was. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't heard from Attorney Fitzpatrick.
I'm not aware of a procedure in a subdivision application where you have very firm requirements, where a applicant can submit alternative plans for consideration by a commission, particularly in the context of a public hearing, where the chair had already indicated, frankly, that we probably would not be hearing public, or didn't anticipate hearing public comment this evening. And I think that it violates the rules of fundamental fairness. I think that this commission has changed its regulations on subdivisions as it pertains to this zone. I think that Attorney Fitzpatrick is trying to get another bite at the apple this evening. And, I think it sets a terrible precedent for this commission. I think it is not fair to the public. And I think if Attorney Fitzpatrick is going to submit a new plan, that it should go through the process that all subdivision plans go through.
Well, I'm not going to restrict Mr. Fitzpatrick as to what he can do in his rebuttal at this time. And if there is an argument that the evidence submitted somehow exceeded that which is allowable in rebuttal, then then we'll deal with that when the time comes. But Mr. Fitzpatrick is well within his right to have his rebuttal, and
and he's also been gracious enough to let the public respond to his
Right,
rebuttal as
right,
well.
right.
So it's not like he's just trying to close this and that, where this commission is going to end it afterwards. He's actually giving you the right to speak afterwards and respond to what he's going to present to us now.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I just only want to comment because I think I was the one that said it would be for rebuttal. Just in past practices of the commission for any application, not necessarily subdivision, but any application, we always go applicant, public, rebuttal. The words you're kicking around, new planners, is really different, but I always say, that rebuttal is supposed to be just that, a rebuttal. If the applicant provides new evidence, any document or so that, other than just some simple letter that refutes something, any new evidence, if it's a new report, a modified traffic report, anything like that, I would consider that new evidence and let the public have a chance to respond. I wouldn't necessarily consider it a new application. So, so when I said it was rebuttal, I didn't mean that, well, if you throw out some new evidence, we're not going to let the public have a chance to respond because I think they have that right. So just clarifying my intent.
That's right. And certainly, in my experience on the commission, it has occurred where the applicant has provided some new evidence in rebuttal, and we have done just that, where we have allowed the public or interested parties time to review the material and to come back to a public comment period. I think what you're trying to argue now is that he should be precluded in the moment from submitting material, and I just don't see what authority we have to do that. I
Well,
mean,
we
this
all,
is rebuttal.
I would submit that the public and the applicant walk in on equal footing, and that this is a public hearing. There are rules which govern the workings of this commission. There is a process which governs the workings of this commission. And I would submit, and I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that sometimes the process which the commission is suggesting, this matter becomes more of a workshop than a public hearing. And I think that you do have procedures. I would ask you, with all due respect, I would ask that the commission, if the commission wants to see what Attorney Fitzpatrick is proposing to offer, and if in fact he is altering the layout or the size or the dividing line between two lots, I would submit that that should go through the various processes. So I would ask the commission at the very least to maintain an open mind. And if in fact the lines are being moved, the sizes of the lots are being altered and so forth, that the commission decline.
And if indeed he is submitting a new, an alternate plan which does that, I'm telling you that you will have an opportunity to consider it and to make the arguments that you're making right now.
Thank
And
you.
he's agreed to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just complete my argument on this point so that it's on the record.
Sure.
There are no various processes to go through before filing a subdivision application. This is not a special exception. It's not a special permit. You don't go to code enforcement, show up, and you hand in the application. We are not bypassing any process. There's another recent case, the Valley Mobile Home Park LLC versus Naugatuck Planning Zoning Commission, a 2012 Superior Court case that discusses this issue. That court concluded that the commission properly considered the applicant's revised plans for the construction of 4 additional buildings because, quote, Nichols filed these plans before the close of the public hearings on the application, end quote. The case goes on to cite Fuller, which is the Land Use Practitioner's Bible. Land Use and Law and Practice section 21.5, which states, agencies usually accept any documents that are filed with them before or at the public hearing, end quote. There's all sorts of cases about post-hearing submission of evidence as being completely unfair and inappropriate. There's no case that says that submitting information during the course of a public hearing is inappropriate. I would submit that fundamental fairness requires that the applicant have the opportunity to present evidence that contradicts a key argument of the opposition. Back to my presentation. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Vitterla. Mr. Vitterla is a registered land surveyor and professional engineer working with the Huntington Company in Fairfield. Michael.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, as Mr. Fitzpatrick says, I'm here representing the application. I'd like to present to you an alternate plan. That was the outcome from last public hearing.
It's all the same? Are they all the same?
Yes, these are the smaller ones.
I'll take the smaller one.
I got a small one.
I'll take the smaller one to use my glasses.
I guess the big and the small is the same.
Smaller
Put my glasses.
what I prefer right here. Let's take the whole table.
What this alternate plan that I presented this evening shows is the westerly street line of Sasco Hill Road. In doing that, we show a full 50-foot right-of-way and the shaded area on the left side of the map on the westerly property line of us. We're going to dedicate 2,712 square feet to the town for the purpose of somewhere in the future, if the town wanted to rebuild Sasco Hill Road or put whatever type utilities within that 50 feet. And in doing so, I had to rearrange the property line that split the proposed two lots. And what we did, this line that I'm drawing now shows the line on the plan that sits in your file now. So what we simply did is we took this area here and put it into lot 1, took this area here, put it into lot 2. We now have this line reconfigured to show two conforming lots, to show a full 50-foot right-of-way of Sasco Hill Road. In doing so, the second sheet of the plan shows the house location, septic location, stormwater location, driveway location. These locations are exactly the same as the site plan that sits in your file now. The only thing that I did was for the end of the driveway, there was a set of galleries that collected the water before the water spilled into Sasco Hill Road. I slid those 3 galleries out of the proposed dedicated right-of-way. But otherwise, the house, the main septic system, the proposed driveway, the main stormwater system is the same as the plan that's in your file from last week.
So basically what you did was we just changed the lot line,
That's correct.
number 1.
Yep, right here.
Number 2, you dedicated the space in the front on the road.
Full 50 feet.
50 feet.
From the opposite street line.
And move the drainage at the end of the driveway.
Yeah, at the end of the driveway, there's 3 units, and I just slid them back out of the deeded space to the town.
Okay.
Mr. Vitterla. The dates, the revision dates on the plans?
On the ones tonight?
Yeah.
It's not a revision, it's a new plan, and they're dated December 3. Is that your question?
It is,
Okay.
yes. So this,
This is an alternate plan. It's not a revised, the plan that's in your file is the plan that was presented at the last public hearing. This is the subsequent plan that came from the question about the full 50 feet.
Anything further, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Chanel.
Mr. Vitterla,
Yep.
Mr. Vitterla, with the change in the lot lines, does this in any way affect the lot square for either property? In other words, do any of the drainage or any other kinds of systems fall within the lot square?
No. Now look at the second sheet. The square contains the house naturally, but it doesn't contain, in this case, it does not contain the septic system. I beg your pardon? Yes, the septic system for this is in the back.
Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I have a question. I actually didn't ask this the last time, but I just want to make sure, the print in front of me is rather small, Mr. Vitterla, so with this new plan, with kind of the jagged property lines,
Yes.
the existing residence is still say 30 feet away from the
That's correct,
the lot?
yes, and that's a portion, the westerly portion of the existing house will come down,
Okay,
as was the plan, the previous plan that you have.
okay,
That was always the case.
okay.
As a matter of fact, this line right here is the same line that is on the previous plan.
Yeah. Actually,
The two exchanges are this trapezoid and this rectangle.
yeah, you know what just confuses me, because this is a rear lot situation. You know, I usually like to think, where's the street line, where's the side line, and where's the rear line? I'm just not sure what that line is, because, you know, the street line is up front with the front property.
That's correct.
This is the rear
Up here.
lot. The side property regs are 30, but a rear property line in the AAA zone is 50 feet. So I'm just not sure how we consider that middle line. So that's more of a question for staff, I think, since it creates our regulations.
Our definition of setbacks defines that. For the front lot, Lot 2, that line would be a rear, because the distance, the direction of measurement we take from the property line towards the structure. And in our definitions for setback is if that direction is moving away from the street line, then it is a side property line. If that direction is towards the street line, then it's a rear property line. So it clarifies that middle setback line for a rear lot. For the front lot, that separation line is a rear, and for the back lot, it's a side.
So, I'm sorry, I have to ask Mr. Went one other question. Is that okay, Mr. Chairman? So, if I got this straight, if you're in the AAA zone, the street line is 60, the two sides are 30, and the back is 50.
That's correct.
But on this rear lot, we've got three sides and a back. Is that how we look at it?
That's
30, 30, 30, and 50?
That's correct.
Because there's no street line.
Well, there is, but it's
Frontage.
way out by the street, and it's still, you need 60 feet from the street line out where the frontage is.
Okay.
But the remaining property lines, you're correct, three sides and a rear.
Actually, this question is really about both the original and the alternate plan. I thought of it now, so I asked it, and I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Any other questions for Bill?
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Chairman, I would note that your subdivision regulations, this 2.1.10, affords the commission the authority to modify the 50-foot requirement. My position is that modification is a majority vote. You've got several sections in your subdivision regulations that use that kind of language. 1.1.12, a traffic study may be required for a lesser number of lots at the discretion of the commission. Section 3.2.4, a sidewalk area of a minimum width of 10 feet shall be graded from the edge of the pavement, provided that the commission, in its discretion, may reduce such minimum width where appropriate. Turnarounds, 3.2.1.5, 45 feet in the case of all public roads and private roads, etc., except that the commission, in its discretion, may require a landscaped island in the center of such turnaround. So my position is that when 2.1.10 says the commission may modify this requirement in its discretion, it's identical to these other situations in your subdivision regulations where you have discretion. I think it's a majority vote. I recognize that there is a section at the end of the subdivision regulations that talks about a waiver of certain requirements, requiring a 3/4 vote. I think this is less in the nature of a certain requirement and more in the nature of something that clearly the commission recognized when it put the subdivision regulations might well need modification because it doesn't make sense to take 50 feet in every instance. and so you put in that language. Regardless, it's either, I am requesting that the existing Sasco Hill right-of-way be utilized, and you can vote on that as I deem appropriate on a majority vote, or, as Attorney Green will undoubtedly deem appropriate, on a three-quarters vote. If you deny that waiver, this plan alternate that you're seeing conforms, and that is just fine with the applicant. But I think, for the reasons I'll outline to you, that a modification makes sense. Again, the alternate plan is only relevant in the event that you do not modify the 50-foot right-of-way requirement. I would submit the reasons for modifying are several. One, Sasco Hill and its presently configured right-of-way and paved portion has existed this way for decades. I rode my bicycle up there to carry golf bags at the Country Club of Fairfield. I won't say how many years ago, but it's at least 50. The area here is not a bottleneck. It's essentially the same as the rest of the road. There's no need for additional road width. The town has indicated no intention to widen the paved portion or install sidewalks. Indeed, the town could widen the pavement or install sidewalks in the present right-of-way. I would like to submit, this is just a copy, as Mr. Vitterla will hand out, of the assessor's maps. It's on several pages. Just put them together. The point is, when you look at that map, which runs from basically Harbor Road and Tide Mill Terrace to the end of Sasco Hill Road. If you look at the numbers, first of all, the yellow parcel is the McDonald parcel. If you look at the numbers, those are street frontage numbers from the assessors. And since there are no more rear lots, in essence, you would need in this zone 400 feet of frontage on Sasco Hill Road to have a subdivision. The only property is the Conroy property at the very end. It might be able to accommodate a subdivision. There's another lot with 419 feet, but it's only 2 acres. It cannot be subdivided. My point is that if there is some notion that you're going to take land as part of additional subdivisions on Sasco Hill Road and widen that right-of-way, it's not happening. There's going to be no more subdivisions on Sasco Hill Road, with one possible exception, and therefore this notion of we will acquire additional rights-of-way and acquire 50 feet and then do something with it is simply a pipe dream, unless the town wishes to engage in a taking along the entirety of Sasco Hill Road, which would be a very interesting procedure. I would submit that's extremely unlikely. My point is, I believe there's no bona fide purpose to require additional right-of-way land, but the applicant will comply if the commission so decides. I would just note that the alternate plan does not involve the acquisition of additional property, which gave us the square footage, does not change house locations, driveway locations, etc. It just alters the common lot line. I don't think that a lot line change can be contorted into constituting a new plan, which requires a new application, which the commission well knows cannot be filed due to the change in regs, particularly when the lot line change is literally an alternate plan, applicable only if you decide not to waive the 50-foot requirement, and that plan is in direct response to the issue raised by the opposition. There are several other issues raised by the opposition at the last hearing that I'd like to address. One was that there could be other subdivisions on Sasco Hill Road. First of all, that contention is completely irrelevant to the application before the commission. But secondly, based on the information you've just seen, There looks to be only one other possible subdivision on Sasco Hill Road, and approval of this application, which is again one additional lot, will hardly open the floodgates. Two other issues raised by the opposition were off-site traffic and property values. They can be dealt with together. Connecticut case law, particularly the Sowen Associates case and the Pansy Road case, are definitive on this issue. Sowen Associates, 23 Connecticut Appellate 370 in 1990 case states, quote, "We must conclude that because the plaintiff's land is located in a residential zone and its plan was to use the property for residential purposes, the commission could not weigh off-site traffic concerns, municipal services required by the development, property values, or the general harmony of the district when requiring whether to approve plaintiff's subdivision application," end quote. Again, a subdivision application, as here, and the court explicitly concludes the commission could not weigh off-site traffic concerns, which you're very well aware of per the Pansy Road case, nor could the commission consider municipal services required by the development, property values, or the general harmony of the district when deciding whether to approve the application. The commission is necessarily limited to the application itself and the property itself. I've already reviewed in my initial presentation to you in November the specific aspects of the letter of denial for the first application and the manner in which this application fully satisfies those concerns. I will review them just so it's in the record very quickly. The first reason stated in the April 15th denial was the proposed plan does not comply with Section 2.7 of the zoning regulations and that more than one dwelling will be served by a single access to a rear lot. The present plan has been altered relative to the initial plan in that there is a separate driveway serving the charred property located in the charred easement. There's a separate driveway accessing the McDonald property located in the McDonald accessway. As I pointed out earlier, the issue of the validity and legality of the two dwellings on the charred lot has been conclusively settled. The town attorney and zoning offices have confirmed that the variance permitting the second dwelling is fully valid and unconditional. The legality of those dwellings is fully confirmed. In addition, the action of the ZBA denying the opposition appeal relative to the Onion Barn dwelling of the McDonald's confirms that the Onion Barn dwelling is a valid single-family residential dwelling, and as such, two dwellings on the McDonald property are fully valid and legal. The issue of the safe and practical means of access, you saw the fact that the fire department has reviewed this property. Because the ability to access the property by a fire truck was explicitly mentioned in the first hearing, the department has concluded there's absolutely no difficulty. The record is devoid of substantial evidence that the access does not provide a safe and practical means of access. The second reason for denial cited the plan does not comply with 1.1.6 of the subdivision regs, and that the accessway will be serving more than a single interior lot. The proposal you have now includes a separate 10-foot wide driveway and a separate accessway area dedicated to the charred property, and a separate 10-foot wide driveway and a separate accessway dedicated to the McDonald property. Neither accessway under the revised plan is serving more than a single interior lot. The fact that the opposition has raised no objections to the applicant's application on these points, I think indicates to me they recognize there are no longer any valid issues on these points, at least. As you've heard from me, I'm not going to recite the subdivision law again. You're well aware of it. Your commission is a commission of law. You're bound to follow the regulations as well as state statute. Your decisions are not a referendum, but rather a matter of law. There are no wetlands on this property. There's no historic district applicable to this property. Town engineering has no issue with the proposed storm drainage, septic system design, or sightline. And the only experts you've heard from are Mr. Vitterla as well as the Town of Fairfield Engineering Department. I submit that this application complies with your regulations and should be approved. The commission can modify the 50-foot right-of-way requirement and approve the original subdivision plan, or refuse to modify the 50-foot requirement, include the provision that a 50-foot right-of-way must be provided as a condition of approval. Either way, the application should be approved. The inclusion of such a condition of approval is not new or unusual. Probably a majority of your decisions have conditions added. This is a re-subdivision application that creates one additional lot opposite the Country Club of Fairfield parking lot. There will be less living units with the approval than was the case before. My clients are entitled to the legally permitted use of their property. I urge you to approve this application. Mr. Vitterla and I would be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, Attorney Fitzpatrick. Are there any questions? The applicant having concluded their rebuttal in light of new material having been submitted, and there was a new plan, whether we consider it to be an alternate plan or not, it's not a revision of the old plan, it is a new plan. Attorney Green?
I really am at a loss as to how to respond to this. This is a new plan. This is not a... I have not had a chance to study the plan. I guess it was drafted a week ago, but we've not had the benefit of seeing it till this evening. It's apparent, I hope it's as apparent to me as it is to this commission that this is a new plan. The boundary lines of these properties have been completely altered. The size of the rear lot has been altered. And the thing that troubles me is Attorney Fitzpatrick has indicated that this is fully compliant with the regulations. Well, it's not, because while the original application was filed before you amended the zoning regulations have now changed. And I frankly don't know which plan the commission would like me to address this evening, because Attorney Fitzpatrick seems to be saying, and there will be a new precedent apparently in Fairfield that says, submit 2 or 3 plans and say to the commission, pick whichever one you like. That seems to be as I understand it, the process that's being suggested to this commission is there was an application submitted, there was no waiver of the 50-foot rule set forth in the subdivision regulations submitted. We raised that issue. The applicant has now, today, requested a waiver and said to the commission, if you don't like the waiver, here's my new application, which doesn't need a waiver. And I guess I seek the commission's guidance, but under any circumstances.
Fine, then I'll give you some guidance. I think you have 2 options. You can either make the arguments that you are now, and the hearing will close and we will consider the application as submitted in light of the record, or as Attorney Fitzpatrick has agreed and I've suggested, that you would have the opportunity, if you would like it, to review the materials, compose your arguments, and have an opportunity to address us in the future. I mean, I think we do have a little bit more time. Not
Okay,
much,
well...
But I think that we could accommodate that, and I think that as a matter of fundamental fairness to you, that you would, be afforded that time to consider those arguments. And those arguments that you might present could be a combination of the ones you're making now, as well as a substantive review of the additional new material for you to argue with respect to that.
And I appreciate that Chairman's presenting me with those options, but I'd also like to bring to the Commission's attention...
Excuse me.
Sure.
So we have 17 days left on this application.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I was going to raise is, on behalf of the Sasco Hill Neighborhood Association and Mr. Rubin, I greatly appreciate the Commission's indulgence to allow us additional time to review this. What about the rest of the public? What about the rest of the public who may have come to the zoning department today and looked in the file this morning and saw nothing and concluded that there would be nothing new in this application, and they left for vacation, or who knows, whatever they concluded, or whoever in the public would like an opportunity to rebut or is here this evening. I don't speak for the entire public. I speak for two clients, basically. And I would suggest to the Commission that the process is thereby flawed.
Commissioner Leslie?
In all due respect to Mr. Green and the public that wants to hear this, the only change that has been made to this application is the right-of-way. Basically, that's what we're looking at here, okay? There is nothing else that's been changed to this, and I think this commission is educated enough to handle this application that we have to continue this for another night based on a 50-foot right-of-way on Sasco Hill Road, because basically that's all we're looking at. We're looking at the right-of-way and then bringing the drainage back to accommodate the right-of-way, and in doing so, changing two lines on the lot line. So that's the only change. We're not moving a house, we're not moving a septic system, we're not moving a driveway. Yeah.
Mr. Leslie, with all due respect, if I may, the configuration of the lots, the shape of the lots, the boundary lines, there are two lots here.
I'm well aware of it, Mr. Green, what we're looking at here, and I'm well aware of what was presented here tonight.
But for you...
Now, if you want to continue for another 2 weeks and bring the public in because we're giving them a 50-foot right-of-way to the town, which is basically what we're doing, I think the commission can handle that. I don't think this commission should be extending this for another 2 weeks. This has been on and on and on, and we've given both sides more ample opportunity to go through this application.
Apparently we
Might as well.
Commissioner?
I think what's got to be clarified, and I don't know if that can be done, is, what it seems Mr. Green is saying is that he thought he was arguing based on the plan that was presented, and he assumed that the rebuttal would be related to that. And his concern is that now I guess we'll have a choice of two plans. Now, I've been on the commission for 6 years, and I don't remember too many times where, when an applicant came for some other subdivision, that they brought us two plans and said, well, if you want to waive, you can do this. I don't remember that. That's all I'm saying. I think that's his concern. He seems to want us to either go up or down on what was originally presented, and if we want to waive the 50-foot right-of-way, we could.
Right.
But we wouldn't consider the alternate plan. Do you see what
No,
I'm saying?
I agree with you 100%
Right.
on that.
Right.
You know,
So I guess,
think we should
is that,
just-
do you guys feel that we can do that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've been presented it.
What I'm trying to say is that we are not deciding tonight whether the additional material that's been presented is received or not. It's received. It's in the record. Now, Attorney Green, you've been afforded an opportunity here to consider this and make additional arguments, or essentially rest on the arguments that you've made here tonight and allow the commission to consider the application on the record that's before us. Now, we may very well decide exactly what you're arguing, or we may decide against you. I'm not telling you how we will deliberate and what we will decide. Your arguments are noted. I mean, you know, the fact that there's been new material submitted here tonight is not escaping anyone.
Well, I suppose what I'm asking is for this commission to decline to consider the new material as it pertains to a new subdivision map.
I think everyone on the commission fully understands that that is your request tonight.
Well, I don't know Perhaps I...
There have been numerous occasions in my experience on the commission where the applicant has submitted new evidence, and it's not just in response to public comment, but there's been new evidence submitted during the public hearing, in the rebuttal stage, where we've continued the hearing to give the public an opportunity to consider the new material and have a further public comment, following which the applicant will have their further final rebuttal, and then we've closed the hearing. That has happened any number of times, okay? In a matter of fundamental fairness to you, and in recognition for exactly the proposition that you are arguing, namely, that there has been new material submitted to us, including a request for modification and a plan. I'm not going to characterize it one way or the other, but it's a plan. It's been submitted to us. We recognize that. As a matter of fundamental fairness, Attorney Fitzpatrick has agreed, and it's been suggested, if you would like the opportunity to do so, that you would have an opportunity to consider it and make further arguments. Or we can close the public hearing.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I suppose I would ask for a brief opportunity to consult with my client. Certain of my clients are here. There are other members of the public which I may be
I
here
understand.
this
I understand. And if we continue the public hearing, then you've done them a service. I'm happy to grant a brief 5-minute recess so that you can consult with your clients.
evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Technical sometimes with the legal points.
Attorney Green?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rubin and Sasco Hill have elected to proceed this evening with the understanding that the hearing will be closed this evening. Is that?
That's correct. That's correct. So with the submission of this new material, we have afforded the public a further opportunity to comment, and not just Attorney Green and Sasco Hill Homeowners Association, but any member of the public present tonight. When you're finished, may come and speak for or against the application, and then Attorney Fitzpatrick will have a rebuttal. Hopefully, we won't see any new papers in that rebuttal, and the public hearing will be closed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that understanding, for the record, my name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport, the law offices of Green and Gross. It's my pleasure to appear this evening once again on behalf of the Sasco Hill Neighborhood Association and Jeffrey Rubin. Mr. Rubin is an abutter of the property, and Sasco Hill Neighborhood Association is composed of residents of Sasco Hill Road and certain other streets in the area. Just to reiterate, and forgive me if I repeat some of my presentation from the last public hearing, but I am responding this evening to a letter dated December 10th, which the Commission received earlier today. It appears that the applicants are requesting, they suggest to reduce the section 2.1.10 requirements set forth in the subdivision regulations. The required 50-foot right-of-way. Once again, there is a reference to plans, which I have not had an opportunity to review in detail. But with respect to the waiver, I would submit, first of all, that the waiver was submitted today, was not originally submitted with the application. Section 2 of the subdivision regulations contains the map design standards which are required for all subdivisions. Section 2.1, and this is significant, provides that streets shall be planned in such a way as to provide a safe and convenient road system for present and prospective traffic. So I raise that because, as I pointed out at the previous hearing, Sasco Hill Road is a narrow road that is heavily used. It's heavily traveled. It's a beautiful street. It's a street that we've all been on. There is a town beach that's heavily used at the end of Sasco Hill Road. There is, of course, the Fairfield Country Club, and it's a street that people enjoy running on, biking on, and using. And once again, I was recently, and I've been at a number of functions And if there is any parking in the street that is required, it's a very difficult street to navigate. And so there is, I think it is desirable for some future planning to address issues of safe and convenient travel. And even though Attorney Fitzpatrick rode his bike there, I rode my bike there as well, and I can tell you that it is a narrow street, and you're all familiar with it. Section 4.0, I'm sorry, Section 2.1.10, as I'd referenced, requires that the right-of-way with respect to a subdivision proposed on an existing town road be widened to 50 feet, and we've spent some time discussing that this evening. It does provide that the commission may modify this requirement in its discretion, and Section 4 deals with the modification or variance of certain requirements of the subdivision regulations, and that is the subdivision regulations for which a modification is permitted. It does not say, by the way, eliminate the requirement. It suggests modification. It says that the commission, upon written request from the applicant, and once again, that written request came after this application was filed and just came today, upon written request from the applicant by a 3/4 vote of all members, may modify or vary specific requirements herein with respect to a subdivision where, owing to conditions specifically affecting such subdivision, a literal enforcement of these subdivision regulations would result in practical difficulty and unusual hardship, so that substantial justice will be done and the purpose and intent of these subdivision regulations secured. No waiver shall be granted that would have a significant adverse effect on adjacent property or on public health and safety. Now, interestingly, at the last session, Commissioner Wagner asked a question and inquired about waiver versus modification, and I note it's interesting that in Section 4, both the word modification and waiver are used in that section, which is interesting. Now, the variance power and the right of this commission to have the right to essentially act akin to what a ZBA would do with respect to subdivisions is something that is specifically delegated pursuant to Section 8-26 of the regulations. I did provide the commission with a copy at the last session, so it is in the record. And once again, in the McKenzie case, which has been cited by, I cited and Attorney Fitzpatrick cited, but McKenzie does stand for the proposition, and its standing is for the rule that the scope of a zoning commission's power is strictly limited to the powers conferred on it by the legislature. And so, in having the opportunity to modify or waive requirements of the subdivision regulations, there's a statute that provides the specific conditions under which you can do that, under which you can adopt regulations to do that. And there's case law, Finn versus Planning and Zoning Commission, which is 156 Connecticut 540, Compare versus Planning Commission of Danbury, which is 1999, Connecticut Superior Court, Lexus 1841. Those cases say, since the entire field of subdivision regulation is a creature of statute, any waiver may only be granted according to the terms specified in the statute. That means it's not discretionary. You have to find the specific requirements that allow you to waive. And in this case, none of that was provided. In this case, the applicant, now they submitted this letter today, and again, they don't seek a modification really, they seek an elimination. The applicant has offered nothing that would enable the commission to modify the requirement. No evidence whatsoever. The applicant has not shown that this subdivision regulation particularly affects their property as opposed to others on Sasco Hill Road. In fact, it's clear, or other properties similarly situated, it applies equally to all properties. The applicant has not shown anything that is unique about their property. Similarly, the applicant has offered nothing as to what the effect of waiving this rule would be on adjacent properties. There was nothing offered in terms of values, in terms of impact, no expert testimony, no nothing. on that. The applicant has not offered anything on public health and safety in terms of the safety aspects of waiving the rule. And it's bad, it's terrible policy to simply waive this, and it's not something that should be done casually by this commission just based on a request by the applicant. I suppose I would also note that anything, I haven't even seen whatever document, there was a map that Attorney Fitzpatrick apparently showed the commission. It wasn't shown to the public, it wasn't put up on the board, and frankly, I haven't seen it. So I can't really...
It was in his, I think that's what you're talking about right there?
Oh, is this the one that was shown to the commission? Because
Yeah.
it wasn't
So
referred
we
to at the
got-
time.
You didn't, did you give him a copy of this?
Oh, great. Well, I have it now, Mr. Chairman.
But you
so-
didn't have that before.
Basically, the language that is used in this regulation is identical to the language that is applicable under 8-6 to zoning boards of appeals, where it deals with hardship. And there's ample case law dealing with hardship and zoning board of appeals that simply says that you can't have hardship where a hardship is self-created, first of all.
What's the link, what's the legal link between our regulations and the ZBA analysis?
The analysis is that the language specifically is, you're aware of the language in Section 4, which
Right.
deals with the standards
looked
upon
at.
which you can waive. Section 8-6A, Subdivision 3, says that a zoning board of appeals can determine and vary the application of the zoning regulations in harmony with their general purpose and intent, with due consideration for conserving the public health, safety, convenience, welfare, and property values. And this is the significant part, where it says, where, owing to conditions especially affecting such parcel, but not generally affecting parcels in the district in which it is situated, a literal enforcement of such bylaws, ordinances, or regulations would result in exceptional difficulty or unusual
Right.
hardship.
My question is, what is the link? What is the authority for applying that section, 8-6A3, which is literally applied to the ZBA,
Right.
and our decision-making under Section 4 relative to 2.1.10?
Because both of them make regulation to reference to cases where conditions exist which affect the subject land and are not generally applicable to other land in the area. That's in your subdivision regulations. Provided that the regulations shall specify, I'm sorry, just one moment. It says in Section 4 that that the commission, upon written request from the applicant, may modify or vary specific requirements herein with respect to a subdivision, where owing to conditions especially affecting such subdivision, a literal enforcement of these subdivision regulations would result in practical difficulty and unusual hardship.
Right.
And Section 8-6 has the same language in it, where it refers to exceptional difficulty. It literally says, where literal enforcement of the bylaws, ordinances, or regulations would result in exceptional difficulty or unusual hardship. They both use that phrase.
Just trying to follow your logic, okay, and make it clear. So you're now going to talk about cases interpreting 8.6,
Yes,
and you'd like us to adopt that rationale with regard to Section 4 because the same language is used.
correct.
Thank you.
Unusual hardship.
Thank you.
And the law is clear on unusual hardship, that it is not unusual hardship where you're frustrated in the use of your property, or you had hoped to, or where you engage in conduct which is basically self-created hardship, where you're frustrated and you're economically motivated, you're interested in subdividing a parcel. You are creating the hardship. At the present time, you have a lot, and you want 2, or you want 3, and you're saying to this commission, I need 2 lots. Well, you don't need 2 lots. That's a self-created hardship, basically. So it's not the enforcement of the regulation that's creating the hardship here. Really, the hardship arises from the applicant's personal and self-created desire to subdivide the parcel. That's what's creating the problem here. And that is not hardship by virtue of this regulation. That is the argument. So I don't think that the commission, first of all, the applicant in its primary presentation didn't offer anything that would justify the extraordinary action by this commission in waiving the 50-foot rule. It is desirable to enforce the 50-foot rule for future planning. It is a specific policy in your regulations, once again, that streets shall be planned in such a way as to provide a safe and convenient road system for present and prospective traffic, that is, into the future. And there is no basis upon which this commission could find where, owing to conditions especially affecting this parcel, and they've not provided that basis, that this commission could make a finding that there's hardship here, such that you should waive that rule. And I think it's a terrible policy. I can't assess Attorney Fitzpatrick's presentation in terms of the acreage of all the other lots on this street, or indeed on any street in Fairfield that would be subject to this, where there's 4+ acres. And is this open the doors for everyone to come and say, well, I have, not just on Sasco Hill Road, and it's convenient for Attorney Fitzpatrick to just show this street, but there are a lot of streets and there are a lot of people in Fairfield who have 4 acres or just over 4 acres and are subject, and we're all subject to the same subdivision regulations. And part of the case law, and the case that Attorney Fitzpatrick and I both keep citing, is that there's a uniformity rule, and there's got to be an expectation and there's got to be a policy that the rules are enforced equally everywhere. And Attorney Fitzpatrick and the applicant cannot show that this property is uniquely affected by the subdivision regulation. I will say that... yes.
Quick question. What's the site for McKenzie? You want to read the case?
I have it, and you give me one moment.
Yeah.
Oh. Mackenzie's site is, well, it's appellate court, I have the docket number, one moment. We both have advanced copies of it. It is I think I had put a copy of it into the record at the last hearing. Grab a copy. I'm going to submit a copy of it to the commission. I have it.
That's great. Yeah, we can. Now, you've used the phrase that this property is not uniquely affected by the regulations a couple of times. Is that from the McKenzie case?
No, it's not. The McKenzie case really deals more with the limitations of the authority of this commission to waive, vary, or modify the provisions of the zoning regulations. And it stands for the proposition in one section. I know Attorney Rizzio is here this evening and could comment on it.
It was quoted
more
earlier.
Deeply, but
You're famous.
But it really stands for the proposition that, generally speaking, that the ability to waive the zoning regulations is something that is by statute within the purview of the ZBA only, except where there are specific delegations to the commission and conditions under which a zoning commission can exercise that power.
Right. Then you went on to recite the different language in Section 4, and then you analogized that, not analogized, but you pointed out that the same language appears in Section 8.6, and you started talking about the case law interpreting that language as guiding us in how to, make the analysis.
I would submit this. I would submit that Section 4 is the expression of this commission, of the subdivision regulations enacted by this commission pursuant to 8-26 and within those guidelines. So that's Section 4. And it is consistent with the delegation of 8-26.
Right.
this is done so rarely that there is a paucity, there's a lack of case law on this area. So in interpreting language, besides the plain meaning of the language, so the first step is our regulations and the statutes are interpreted according to their plain meaning. And the plain meaning of 8-26 and the plain meaning of Section 4 is very clear in terms of really limiting the conditions and situations and under which this commission can vary the requirement.
Right, and you used in that vein several times the notion that this property was not uniquely affected by the regulations. And my question was just simply, is that your argument, or is that a recitation of some interpretation that a court has provided somewhere?
My response to that is, one, that the applicant in its presentation did not demonstrate to this commission that this property is uniquely affected by the imposition of this regulation. That means that this property is different than all the other properties around it.
Why does it have to be uniquely affected?
Because that's what the regulation requires.
That's my question.
It's got to be unique, because I have a hardship that no one else around me has. I have a hardship that no one else around me has that at least satisfies one prong of this regulation. Now, as you know, for Attorney Fitzpatrick to stand before the commission and say, well, there's only a couple 4-acre parcels, that doesn't satisfy the inquiry, because as you know, your regulations say it's not necessarily that your property is 4+ acres. You can have a 10-acre property or any size property, but there are areas of properties that are not counted towards subdivisions. There are wetlands conditions. There are properties that are odd-shaped that have areas that are not subject to measurement. So there's a whole complex equation that an engineer such as Mr. Vitterla applies in deciding how a property gets subdivided. You've seen it many times. I mean, you've seen it just an infinite number of times over the years. And so to just say, oh, a property is 4+ acres, therefore we're unique, does not begin to satisfy the hardship requirement. There's got to be more to the inquiry. So there would have to be some showing of the difficulty and uniqueness and unusual hardship, and that's not presented here. All that's presented here is, I don't really have enough acreage if you widen the road to 50 feet, therefore waive it so I can have 2 lots. That's what the applicant is saying, and they have to show more. And I would also say, and to respond, it's my sense that the property is not unique, and I'm not going to get involved in offering new evidence this evening because I'm not permitted to do that under the process, and I would never presume to do that.
I think one of the continuances I referred to was, I'm just kidding.
Well, maybe. But, so the point is, the burden was on the applicant. Safety, in terms of the road, there was nothing offered by way of a traffic study or engineering that shows why you would justify the granting of the variance. There was nothing to show that my client, Mr. Rubin, who lives right next door, there's nothing to show that waiving the rule so that the McDonald's can get 2 properties where there's 1 now. There was nothing to show what the impact is on Mr. Rubin's property, so you don't have that in terms of the adverse effect on adjacent property. So the primary thrust of my argument is, I'm not the one who has to show that to get the waiver. In other words, it's not up to the public to come up and say it doesn't exist. The applicant has the burden here. Mr. Fitzpatrick made a comment that the engineering department reviewed the application and they're satisfied with it. Well, there's nothing with respect to the new application. I looked in the file this evening, and there's nothing from the engineering department that deals with this new layout. And so that's not here. And I really, once again, I just have to comment briefly on the process, and I urge the commission to not, I would urge the commission to decline to grant this waiver because the applicant has utterly failed to meet its burden. And it's, again, something that has to be done sparingly. It's not something, and based on the case law that I've cited, it's not something you should do casually. It's unique, and I will tell you, we did an exhaustive search, and there's virtually no case law on it because it's been done so rarely. And So I would decline to grant the waiver, but I cannot stress enough that I would avoid a situation where applicants are able to submit alternative plans such as this one. Again, I haven't had a chance to study it. I understand the practical difficulties. I appreciate the patience of the commission in hearing me this evening, particularly earlier, and my exasperation, and you were very patient with me, and I thank you for that. But I can't emphasize enough that this commission should decline to allow applicants to submit a plan, and with all due respect, this is a completely different plan. The division of the property, the shape of the lots, there's, other than the boundary lines and the location of the structures on the property, the subdivision, which is the essence of this application, is completely different. The division is completely different. And I just think it's a terrible precedent to allow alternate plans to be submitted. I would submit once again that it violates the rules of fundamental fairness to walk into a hearing that has to be closed, where the public may have looked at it. Who knows how many people looked at the file in the last couple days and said, well, there's no real change, you know, I'm going away. And didn't come to the hearing tonight or won't be around in 2 weeks or whenever the commission next meets. And I think that in fairness, as a matter of fundamental fairness and based on the substance of this application, the commission should decline to consider really a new application, particularly where Attorney Fitzpatrick submitted, the applicant submitted that it meets all the standards of your zoning regulations. Well, it doesn't, because this new plan does not meet the standards of your regulations as you've amended them since the date of filing in July. You had adopted a change to the regulations. This does not meet that regulation in terms of the requirements of the minimum square, and I think this would set a terrible precedent with filing applications and then trying to bootstrap and back into plans by submitting two iterations or 3 iterations and saying to a commission, well, here's all of them, take your pick. And once again, I've taken too much of your time, but I want to thank you for your patience. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Do you have any questions for Attorney Green?
On behalf of the Sasco Hill Neighborhood Association and Jeffrey Rubin, I respectfully request that you deny this application.
Thank you, Attorney
Thank you.
Green. Does any other member of the public wish to be heard on this application? Yes, please approach and just state your name for the record.
My name is Molly McGrath, and I live at 1107 Sasco Hill. And I apologize because I didn't know we were going to have an opportunity to speak, so I'm not really prepared. But there are a couple things I would love to say. My first comment is pertains to remarks.
Could you just move the mic a little bit closer, Commissioner Neely? Just can't hear you that well.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
My first remark is about information that was discussed at the last hearing. Mr. Fitzpatrick was looking to cite other subdivisions on Sasco Hill that permitted shared driveways to provide for rear properties. And the subdivision that he cited was 1111 Sasco Hill, owned by Mickey Herbert, and that reference is completely false. The rear property that he alluded to is currently where I reside. It's 1107 Sasco Hill. And even when I looked at it long before I bought it, it always had a full street, normal, separate driveway and access way, which it still has. And in addition, it has another separate driveway onto South Pine Creek, so that's inaccurate. And just if that's part of what could support all of this development in the rear of a property, I want to make sure that you understand that's not accurate. A couple of other things. The open space issue and the changing character of the town is of grave concern, I think, to everyone. Certainly goes far beyond the population of this room right now. And it's really like kind of why we all live here and what we like about it. The open space and the generous, picturesque properties that have long attracted people to Fairfield are really disappearing before our eyes. The town doesn't seem to want to honor the zoning intentions or the spirit of these laws. And you guys, I really felt that with the earlier application today about this property with 4 acres that didn't meet the intent of the law. And about 4 of you said, oh yeah, gosh, I hate to see this. I don't really like this. It doesn't honor the intent. But oh well. I mean, you guys you're the holding line for all of us citizens. And it really is so discouraging that you don't use the teeth of the law when you have it. I mean, I don't know why you would ever have any dismay about voting for something. You should vote for what you believe in, but clearly for what the laws require you to do and what the citizens are relying upon you for. I'm sorry, as I told you, I wasn't quite prepared for this, but I just find it so maddening that there are laws and they're not being applied. They're not being applied evenly, they're not being applied consistently. So, I mean, and there's so much lip service to open space and the Green Initiative, and you know that the state has a whole mandate. The state's willing to put out money to buy stuff. You guys are willing to collect fines and then look for other green space. It's disappearing before our eyes, and we're never going to have an opportunity to save it again. So, if there's such a thing as AAA zoning, the first line on your materials in zoning is that it's a single-family dwelling. Well, not here. I mean, this property, you guys have already approved apartments. So it's not a single-family dwelling. And you've already broken AAA right there. You've already made one exception for this property, and it seems as though you're inclined to continue. I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. But at any rate, it's just very ironic to listen to anything about the open spaces and your zoning rules when you're abandoning them. Sasco Hill, you know, just speaking to traffic now, you know, it's 1 mile long, and it's a beautiful street with breathtaking vistas, gorgeous homes, great expansive properties. It's known, you know, people call it all the time in the paper or whatever, the Gold Coast. And many of the town's residents enjoy it, not just the residents there. But despite being a dead end, this narrow street has a surprising volume of traffic. And at the end of the street is a popular town beach, limited by only one access road. And there's also a private country club, the Country Club of Fairfield. Both of these vast open spaces contribute immeasurably to the beauty of this town, providing valuable scenic pleasure. But both also add significant traffic to an otherwise quiet dead-end street. The Country Club of Fairfield lies 3/4 of the way down the street, and it's a destination golf club drawing guests and traffic from points well beyond this neighborhood and well beyond the town. At this precise juncture of an already busy narrow street is where you're considering the subdivision. It's incredible. AAA zoning requires 2 acres and single-family residences. But you've already legalized the illegal tenured apartments at 893 that I heard rumors that because somebody from P&Z lived there in one of the illegal apartments. And now the same bold developers have applied to have this land subdivided with zoning rules already violated by apartments in the middle of AAA. I don't think we have AAA, to be honest. It's a brazen push for further development. And while the neighbors might fear for property values and loss of beauty on the street, I think the entire town should be up in arms over added traffic on this bucolic drive. You know, to suggest that there's no issue of traffic on this street is insane. You know, we have lawn guys and everybody else, and we have women with baby strollers, and it's usually one lane of traffic to pass on that street. But even appreciating a need for housing in Fairfield does not justify creating a new colony of non-conforming residents in the middle of Sasco Hill. But thankfully, this application doesn't meet the standards of AAA subdivision. So I'm really curious to see what is going to matter here. Is it going to be another exception, or are we going to read and follow the law? When you don't enforce the laws, you don't have them. Arbitrary application is discriminatory and patently unfair. This town and its citizens deserve better, and I urge P&Z to read and apply the regulations of AAA zoning and your own subdivision regs. The temptations to deviate are great, but the rewards of thoughtful and courageous governance are immeasurable. All Fairfield citizens take pride in our historic districts, in our vibrant downtown, our beach neighborhoods, and our scenic Sasco Hill. Let's maintain the integrity of our neighborhoods and the government for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any other member of the public wish to be heard on this application? Please come to the microphone and state your name for the record.
Good evening. I'm Maisie Stanovich, and I actually grew up on Sasco Hill. And I won't keep this very short because I really appreciate all your patience. But what's surprising to me, and I apologize, I wasn't here at the last few meetings due to some family issues, is that everyone seems to forget what Sasco Hill was like back in the day. The homes on Sasco Hill, all those little apartments and the rooms and the facilities, those were for the servants. The people who lived there was one family. It was a one-family dwelling property. People had chauffeurs, maids, governesses, housekeepers, butlers, valets. The staff were the individuals that lived in all those outlying buildings. So my feeling is, if people want to have staff live in those facilities, that should be grandfathered in. But grandfathered does not mean other individuals who are not employees of the owners of the property. So I just want to get that into the record. So when people talk about stuff being grandfathered and people have lived there for years, please understand how it began and what it was really meant for. The second thing is the traffic on Sasco Hill. You may or may not remember that last year over another issue, I did a little traffic study of my own on Sasco Hill. And I'm sorry to say, it's gotten even worse as far as the amount of cars. And on a weekend, the bikers, the runners, it really is getting to be very dangerous because the road is so narrow. So even though, and I apologize, I realize that Attorney Fitzpatrick 50 years ago rode his bike, I would really caution him if he takes his bike out again to ride on Sasco Hill, he better have his helmet on and go very slowly. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to be heard on this application? Nope. Going once, going twice. Attorney Fitzpatrick.
I never thought bicycling would get such a response. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, just necessarily disjointed, but let me try to respond as best I can. Some of it will be a duplication, but I can't help that. Ironic to me that the Herbert property can be subdivided, create a new building lot, but my clients cannot. In terms of the traffic on Sasco Hill, as you well know, under existing applicable case law, you cannot consider it. Pansy, Sewing Associates. Simple. That's the reality of it.
We can, with respect to your request for a waiver.
Yes. Yes. The Attorney Green stated this application has to be closed. It didn't have to be closed tonight. Attorney Green chose to do so. I can't tell you how many times during my appearances before this commission that we've submitted revisions on rebuttal. It's the nature of the process. It's part of what takes place. The opposition raises issues with this, this, and this. You comply and say, okay, how about we do this, this, and this? It's common sense. It's appropriate. It gets to the best result. The McKenzie case, quickly. That case relates to zoning regulations, not subdivision regulations. Says you cannot waive zoning regulations without going to ZBA. Doesn't say anything about subdivision regulations, and I can't find case law either on the waiver provision in subdivision regulations. It would seem to me that when you put the discretion in 4 or 5 sections of the subdivision regulations that I recited, and you include a ZBA type section 4 at the end, that you clearly meant to exclude one from the other. I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was intentional. You recognized that that kind of a situation, like the imposition of a 50-foot right-of-way, where it may make no sense whatsoever, that it would make sense to give you the right to modify it, and I think you have the right to modify it. There is a unique impact on my client because this is the only application of the 50-foot right-of-way on the entire street. And yes, I picked Sasco Hill, oddly enough, because that's where the property is. And the application of the 50-foot right-of-way does not result in the denial of the application. It's not the norm that there are 2 plans in front of you, but you've got a provision in your subdivision regulations that permits this 50-foot right-of-way requirement to be enforced or not enforced. You did that, not the applicant. There are options there. We have shown you the plan with the 50-foot right-of-way, and it conforms, contrary to Attorney Green's representation. It conforms. It's got the square footage. It has everything. If the modification is granted, the original plan it can be approved. It is conforming as well. I would just reiterate, I think the applicant has the absolute right to submit an alternate plan that addresses the primary issue raised by the opposition. It's a gross mischaracterization of our position that we can put in whatever plan we want. The opposition misses the point. It's not fair and reasonable that we should be prevented from addressing the very points made by the opposition. We have the absolute legal right to do so. To do otherwise denies us fundamental fairness and due process. It's not a new, well, I will not go through the alternate versus new plan. The fact of the matter is the only change is the common lot line and the reorientation of a few galleries out of what would become town land. The house stays in the same place. The driveways are in the same place. The access ways are the same. The septic systems are the same. Everything else is the same. To say that the applicant doesn't have the right to make that change, I think, is completely unfair to the applicants here. Again, and in closing, the Commission can modify the 50-foot right-of-way requirement and approve the original subdivision plan, or refuse to decide to not modify the 50-foot right-of-way requirement and include the provision of a 50-foot right-of-way as a condition of approval. Either way, the application conforms and should be approved. The inclusion of such a condition of approval is not new, it's not unusual. Your Commission does so as a matter of course. On the basis of the information that you have before you, my clients are entitled to the legally permitted use of their property and to subdivide this property and create one additional lot, and I urge that this application be approved. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Attorney Fitzpatrick. Hearing on this matter is closed. Next item up for public hearing is 54 Sasco Hill Road, special permit and coastal site plan application of Love Where You Live Homes LLC, pertaining to a new mixed-use commercial and residential building in a design commercial district.
Huh? Probably. Yeah, I think Neil's got it. Neil's got it.
Yes, he just went to the restroom. Yeah. Very good. You ready? Yeah, yeah. Gotta shorten it up. Attorney Rizzio?
Chairman, members of the commission, Raymond Rizzio for the record. I have an office at One Post Road, Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm representing Love Where You Live Home with regard to a special permit application at 54 Sasco Hill Road, which is in a design commercial zone. I think one of the things that's important to note for this, obviously you folks take notice of it. I think members of the public will be have to understand that this is an issue where it is in a design commercial zone where we're bound by the design commercial zone regulations, and that we are here in a special permit, not in a special exception, not in a not a zone change, requesting no variances. So let me tell you a little about this property. This property was it's a lot that's about 11,780 square feet. It's a property that it had a home that was originally built on it. Then back in the 1980s, it was converted into a office building. Later in the 80s, it was converted into a medical office building, and then reconverted back into a just kind of general office. I think there's been some shipping contractor, different types of uses have come in and out of the building. The building currently has about 2,700 square feet of office space. We are looking to establish basically add to the property and create what we like to consider and what this commission has proposed and what your regulations call for, a mixed-use project on this site. We plan on adding an additional 500 to 700 square feet of commercial space and then adding a residential unit above the commercial space. We plan on to do that. We satisfy all your parking requirements and that we have 15 parking spaces. To understand how the project developed, you basically have to understand where we go. We did not have to go to wetlands. There's no wetlands on this property. There's only tidal wetlands, so it's all, that is all gone through and been approved through the wetland department, that they've acknowledged that they don't have any jurisdiction over this matter. William Kenny will talk about how we will improve the whole tidal wetland area. But what's important is, if you note, if you're coming down from downtown out toward Westport, you get to Sasco Hill Road, you make a left, you have your new building which you've approved on the left-hand side On the right-hand side, you have I think it's a 16 or 17,000 square foot office building and a gray building, and this property sits right behind it, driveway down to a building that sits, believe it or not, at an elevation of about 6 feet. So one of the issues that we have to comply with in basically doing our project, which leads to will lead to our whole height discussion, is that we are at a 6.6 feet elevation. We need to bring it to a first floor of 11. So the building will have to be elevated. By elevating the building, and I'm sure you folks could not be more familiar with that as seeing what's going on in the Beach District, we are allowed to take advantage of that and park for our commercial space underneath the building. So when you're at Sasco Hill Road, and that's another thing that when you take a look at this, Sasco Hill Road sits at an elevation of about 13. It's about 7 feet as you go down to where our buildings would sit. We've designed, as I said, a building that has a garage that has parking underneath for both office and residential. Then we have parking along the exterior of the building. There is, and I almost hesitate to say that you almost have a choice. One of the things we would request is that we would request that through the, I think it's section 28.6, but in your regulations with regard to mixed use, you have, the commission has the ability, or the applicant has the ability to propose a waiver of half of the residential parking requirement because of the compatible uses, meaning you have a residential use which you typically think is runs contrary to the use of the office. So your regulations say when you have mixed use, guess what? We don't need all that parking because most likely when the 2 cars are there using the house, the office will be gone. So we would request that, and this submission shows, that we would eliminate this one spot. It's a little bit of an awkward spot. I'll let Mike Galante get into the circulation. But if we get rid of this spot and landscape it, it would allow us to have 14 spaces, which would be consistent with your zoning regulations, which is 3,250 square feet of retail, requiring 13 spaces, 1 residential unit, which is about 2,850 square feet on the second floor, or 2,849 square feet, and another 300 square feet on a upstairs terrace. Your regulations also require in a design commercial zone that your commercial must be on your first floor. In this instance, it'll be above because we have our parking underneath and we have to raise the building. Keep in mind, we really can't build at grade unless we were to bring in, basically 6 feet high of fill to build flat. So the fact that we have to elevate the building gives us the ability to it's the reason our first floor foot is at elevations at 18 feet, because we have 12 feet of space between the first floor between the actual ground elevation and where our first floor starts. So what ends up happening is we're allowed to have this mixed use as long as our commercial space is on the first floor and your apartments are on the second floor. You've had that, you've seen that down at the Brick Walk. This commission has also granted that with similar parking requirements for the. I know Mrs. Green's is an application I did, and Mrs. Green's 1916 Post Road, which is in the same thing, design commercial zone with 2 apartments above the grocery store. And the commission and your master plan basically promotes mixed use, people living downtown, people experiencing downtown, and we believe this application satisfies that. When our client commissioned Mark Andre, our architect, he wanted to take kind of a nautical design and also design something that was very pleasing to the eye and something that would also be able to take, with a lot of glass, be able to take a lot of windows. So we'll take you through the elevations. But if we look at the application strictly from the zoning components, which is, you look at your zone development standards, the property requires a minimum 10,000 square feet. We're at over 11,000 square feet. You mean minimum lot square. Now, the minimum lot square in this zone has to be 75 feet. However, section 25.7.5 states that if it's a pre-existing lot that hasn't been created, and this is not a pre-existing lot that hasn't been created, it's been confirmed through the zoning department, that we are entitled to have a lesser square. Our square is at 50 feet, which we believe is still enough for us to get the project a project of size that warrants this type, of this type. The minimum frontage has to be 30 feet. Our minimum frontage is 52 feet. Yeah, I think it's 25.7.5 with regard to the square. So no variance is needed there. Our minimum setback from the street is required to be 25 feet. We're at 125 feet. What we're doing is we're also pulling the building back basically 12 feet from the tidal wetlands so that we have more space, pulling the building back from the water, making the property more FEMA compliant. With regard to minimum setbacks, the side setbacks are interesting. Your side setbacks in the DCD zone can be 0, no less than 0, obviously it can't be less than 0, and in that instance, no less than 10 on one side. We took the side that abuts the residential portion of the property and made a minimum setback of 10, and the side which abuts basically a wall of commercial is at a 0 setback, which is consistent with your regulation. The minimum floor area, there is no minimum floor area. With regard to height, or the height as calculated pursuant to your regulations, ours is at 39 feet. We're permitted to go to 40 feet. With regard to the number of stories, we're permitted to have 4 stories. We have 2.5 stories. And here's what's important, and I think probably where it'll be difficult for the public and trying to explain to the public what we're permitted in this zone. When you talk about intensity of use and you talk about bulk, you talk about what's permitted in DCD zone. It's not a residential zone where you typically 15 to 20% coverage. Our coverage for building coverage is entitled to be 75% building versus lot. We are requesting design a building that only has 30% building coverage. 30% building coverage is less than half of the building coverage that would be permitted pursuant to your regulations. With regard to our minimum floor elevation, it's currently at 6. We're moving it from 11, which is required a minimum of 11, but we're going to be at 18 feet. What's important about the 18 feet, and that's why I brought up the difference in elevation. Although 18 feet sounds like it's high off the ground, when you take into account the fact that from the street, and it's a long way down to where the property is beginning, you've got at least you got a 7-foot shift in grade. It looks very much consistent with buildings from elevation from the street on Sasco Hill Road. And next, which I think is interesting, is maximum floor area as a percentage of lot area. In a DCD zone, your requirements allow us to have 150% of lot area with regard to percentage with regard to maximum floor area. We're at 60%. So when you take into account that this isn't a DCD zone, DCD is as set forth in your master plans, DCD is set forth in your zoning regulations. Those are the regulations we are to follow. And the question becomes, how do you stress the intensity of what, as to floor area? How do you stress it with regard to coverage? We're nowhere near the maximum amount that we could use as with regard to floor area and with regard to lot coverage. What I'd like to do now is I'll have Mike Galante just to take you through the traffic portion of it, then I'll Bill Kenny talk about the our landscape and environmental concerns, and then I can, yes?
Question on 25.7.5.
Yes.
Says that we can grant a special permit, blah, 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 provided that the lot is a legally existing non-conforming lot. Is
Correct.
this a legally existing non-conforming lot?
This is a legally existing non-conforming lot because it meets the square.
Because it
Doesn't satisfy the square.
doesn't satisfy the square. Thank you.
At least that's a determination when we looked at this. And the lot has been in existence. It's not a lot that has been merged. It's been under separate ownership for years. So it's nothing that's been subject to a cut, that's been created.
Right. No, I'll be perfectly honest. It's the first time I read the section. And as a requirement for application of the section, it has to be a legally existing non-conforming lot.
Right.
Otherwise, we can't apply it. I just want to ask you specifically whether it is.
For the record, yes. Thanks. Mike, if I can get you to come up here, just discuss our traffic, because one of the issues, certainly from listening to the last application, traffic's a major concern of the public, I would assume, of the commission on Sasco Hill Road. And Michael talked to you about the effect this property will have, lack of effect this property will have on traffic, and also the way it's been designed with regard to interior circulation and with regard to our sight lines. Michael.
Thank you. Mike Galante, Frederick Clark Associates. I'll do two things. Traffic on Sasco Hill Road, and then internal as far as the access and the parking layout. We prepared a letter report dated October 25th, 2013, just for reference. And it's simply a letter. It's not a traffic report. It's not a traffic analysis, but it's more of an evaluation. We are essentially adding about 700 square feet of commercial space or office space when we have the opportunity to put one apartment or one residential unit on top of that. So comparing to what's there today, which is vacant, and what we are proposing, 700 square feet of commercial space in one unit, that's essentially 2 cars or 2 trips during a peak hour. So from a traffic perspective, we are adding 2 cars to Sasco Hill Road. Sasco Hill Road, across from our site, almost across, is a development that's under construction, will be completed and occupied, I would assume, sometime next year. Looking at the volumes when that is occupied and fully built and occupied, you have volumes on Sasco Hill Road in front of our site in the range of 250 to 295 vehicles. That's a 2-way volume, 1 hour, weekday morning, weekday afternoon, and a Saturday. The Saturday actually has the higher volume at 295 vehicles during a 1-hour period, typically midday on Saturday, probably 11 to 12 approximately as far as time periods. The posted speed limit on Sasco Hill is 25 miles per hour. It's a 2-lane road. Has a center line. It's about 22 feet in width in the site, along the side frontage. The post road, of course, is nearby, controlled by a traffic signal. Looking at the driveway itself and referring to one of these plans, we're using the existing driveway but improving it for a 2-way traffic flow. So we're maintaining the existing curb cut, if you will, but we're expanding it and improving it. It's going to be wider than Sasco Hill by about 2 feet at the point of the driveway itself. Sight lines looking, let's say, south towards Long Island Sound. The speeds are about 31 miles per hour. We have adequate sight distance, about 350 feet. You can see up the hill actually when you're looking down towards the Sound. In the opposite direction, looking towards Post Road, you can see to the Post Road intersection. If we were to measure that to the middle of Post Road, the center line is about 195 feet. There's really no sight line to measure because the speed is varying as you turn onto Sasco Hill Road. Based on tracking vehicles, which I did, was anywhere from about 18 to 25 miles per hour when you come into Sasco Hill Road from the Post Road. If you're making a left turn in or a right turn in, you get a slightly different speed coming into Sasco and coming towards the site frontage. At the site frontage, that car is traveling about 25 miles per hour. Cars traveling northbound or away from Long Island Sound are traveling about 31 miles per hour as they approach the driveway and approach the intersection at Post Road. Regardless of whether it's a red light or a green light, the speed was about 31 miles an hour as you come down the hill and past the site frontage itself. So it meets the standards as we follow for, in this case, intersection site distance because it's a commercial driveway. If we're doing a residential driveway only, it'd be stopping site distance. So there's a different measurement, as we all know very well. So from a perspective of this development and the change as far as the development on site, we're adding about 2 cars during a peak hour. So from a traffic perspective, I will not say insignificant, but I will say it's a minimal or really almost no impact. There's always an impact. There's no such thing as no impact. But there's really very little impact as far as adding those 2 cars to Sasco Hill Road. So operations of the driveway, operations of the traffic signal, operations or maintaining Sasco Hill Road, there are no changes that we are recommending to change the road to accommodate the additional 2 vehicles during a peak hour. Internally, the driveway is now 24 feet. It comes into the back of the site, if you will, to serve the building itself, which is on the river, or just about on the river. Parking on both sides. It meets the standards as far as parking space sizes along the driveway and a slightly different parking space size at 90 degrees under the building itself or near the bottom of the building. So we meet the standards. Cars can turn around in their driveway and go back out. It's a low-volume driveway. It's a low-volume parking lot. So having the parking spaces on the driveway as you come in is a little unique, but it will work because of the low volume. So that's a summary or an overview of the off-site traffic as far as circulation and potential impacts, and on-site as far as the activities, the circulation, and the layout. And I can answer questions now or at the very end. And I see one right now.
The cars are going to park down on the right-hand side, yeah.
Yes.
And then when they want to come out, they have to pull out and go around it.
They would have to turn around potentially here, and that's wide enough to do that. It wouldn't be a one-shot turn.
So it's a K-turn?
It's what we call a K-turn, yes. And that's why I mentioned it's a low-volume driveway or a low-volume parking lot, so I really don't have an issue with that. If it was a much busier place, office building, a larger office building, and this layout would not be appropriate.
Anything you can do to restrict people from backing out?
Backing out onto Sasco Hill,
I mean, you think that car that's going to park at the very entrance?
such as this here or
Yeah,
here?
yeah, that one on the right-hand side is going to pull right into the parking space, and then when he's ready to go, he's just going to back out?
For the record, one of the things we would propose tonight is to eliminate this spot here.
Yeah.
Which I think, and the other reason for that is there's an easement here, a historical easement, recorded in the land records, which allows the home here, basically their access is through our driveway. So what we would, I don't see that anybody,
I would be surprised.
yeah, I mean, you can't, if the driveway next door, which is the office building, I mean, I just don't see people backing out onto Sasco Hill Road. I mean, not when you can go here and make an easy turn and come right around.
If the driveway was staying at the same width as it is today, there's more of a chance of someone backing out, but we're doubling the width of this driveway. So someone backing out, I really don't think so.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Is that a shared driveway? Is a residential home right next door?
Correct.
Yeah. Is
Yes.
that a shared driveway with that residential home?
Yes.
It is. How will that affect, with all the cars going in and out, how will that affect the residential property?
You have to remember, they have access through our property, so it's not as if we're
Right.
taking commercial traffic
Right.
through their property.
Okay.
So right now, there's a 25 or 2,700 square foot commercial building right now that probably would be, you would consider underparked and with an inadequate driveway. So when you talk about what we're adding potentially 700 square feet and one housing unit. So I don't really see the impact as relates to here because of and I think Michael discussed that, when you talk about what we're increasing use-wise there from a commercial standpoint, is very small. It's,
How many spots are on the parcel now?
there's no line spots. It's kind of a free-for-all. You park where you can.
How wide?
And-
How wide is the driveway going to be?
What's that?
How wide will the driveway be?
The driveway's going to be 24 feet.
The travel way would be 24 feet.
Well, so it got
Traveling.
You have the spots.
Right.
Plus
then
20.
Plus 24 feet.
Okay.
So huge
30,
improvement
40,
over what's there now.
About 33 feet. I just gave you the numbers on this, it's just so small.
I mean, that 2,700 square feet, 2,500 square feet should have, 2,500 square feet should have at least 10, it should have 10 spaces there now. If it has 10 spaces, it has it because everybody's going to back right up against each other within the driveway. So, I mean, the parking doesn't work there now. But the square footage is there, and the commercial use is there. What we're doing is organizing it, improving the driveway, and giving you the adequate turning and driveway aisle that's required under your regulations.
You're only able to fit it now because you're going to raise the building up. That's why you're able to fit the parking. You're currently you'll be able to fit the parking because you have to raise the building up to meet the codes.
Correct, but remember, you can do that anyway. We're not, even with the elevations, we're not asking for a height variance. So whether we had to bring it up to meet FEMA or not, that becomes an economic decision whether somebody wants to build parking under, raise a building and put it underneath. Pursuant to your zoning code, as long as the first floor of space is commercial, you can put a residence on top. That's really a question of money, to be honest with you. Whether, as long as you can satisfy the height requirement, what you do with that first floor, whether you want to use it for parking or you want to use it for on-level, standard level use, that's a whole different thing.
But you wouldn't be able to fit the parking for the size building you want to put there if you didn't raise the building. You need 15 spots. Right now, there's about 6 spots there.
Correct, but what I'm saying is we can fit we can raise we're not, it's not as if we're taking advantage of the FEMA applications. We're taking advantage of being able to build a project that when my client looks at increasing the square footage by 700 feet and adding a residential unit, which he plans on occupying himself, that he has the ability to park underneath. And frankly, with regard to office use, it's nice having covered parking. Look at today. Sure. And same thing for the residents. So what you really have is, what you have now there today really doesn't work. And really what should happen now, what should have happened, but because it's grandfathered, they don't have to do it. This kind of situation should exist to address the 2,500 feet that's there. But they don't need to. It's grandfathered. But it doesn't really work. And what you end up with is kind of mishmash of tenants.
Is there any argument to be made that the parking is the first floor? That in fact, because you're not digging a basement, I guess.
Well, your regulation's kind of interesting about that. It just says that the residential can't be on the first floor. It says the residential has to be above the first floor, correct? I mean, that's...
I was just actually driving off of your comments. You remarked earlier that the requirement is merely that the commercial be on the first floor.
No, the requirement that really only relates to the residential. And Jim, you can correct me, and Joe, you can correct me. And I have the reg right here. Basically, that in a mixed use, your permitted residential, provided it shall not be located on a ground floor and not to exceed 50% of the total floor area. So you can have a 3-level parking garage. As long as that first floor is not residential, I think you're good. We had that issue, and it was interesting, had the same issue with a mixed-use project that we built downtown across from Quattro Pazzi, where it was required that the first floor be commercial behind Quattro Pazzi on Sherman Street, and then the residential was on the second and third floor.
No, that's fine. I was just, the question arose in my mind because of the way that you framed it as commercial being on the first floor.
I might have been a little, I probably could have been a little more exact with the way I described it. But your reg only relates to use in the negative way, that you can't have residential on the first floor.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Mike, or I tend to take field his questions anyway. I don't know. Get in trouble for that. Next, I'd like to call Bill Kenny up. We'll take you through basically our landscape and the improvements we're doing with regard to the environmental impacts.
Good evening. My name is Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. I'm a professional wetland scientist, a soil scientist, and a registered landscape architect. I was retained by the applicant to help them with the inventory and identification of the wetlands on the property. I completed that work and determined, in my opinion, and the wetland agency confirmed that there are no inland wetlands on the property. But on the western side of the property is the tidal Mill River, a tidal portion of the Mill River, and along with that are some tidal wetlands. So I did map those areas, and if you look at the drawing that I prepared, it's titled Planting Plan, and it was last revised October 23rd, and you could see there's a line with a dashed line with W's, and that marks the boundary of the wetland area on the property. I also was asked to prepare a planting plan, which I've just referenced, and there's 2 primary types of planting on the property. There's the planting on the water side of the building and on the landward side of the building. The landward side is a typical planting associated with a parking area. There's several shade trees and a number of areas with ground cover plantings. On the waterward side, there's a somewhat interesting planting. existing tidal wetland, the condition of the wetland today is it's not in a natural condition. There's invasive species. There's common reed Phragmites australis right along the edge of the river, and then there's areas of lawn where the wetland's been maintained as lawn. So from the building to the water, the applicant has agreed to restore that entire area to native vegetation. So we're coming in, we're going to remove the invasive plant material, remove the areas of lawn, areas that have a potential to be fertilized and where pesticides and fertilizers can be put down and pollute the Mill River. So we're going to eliminate that source of pollution, eliminate the undesirable vegetation and come in with native vegetation and revegetate that area in a more natural setting. There won't be any lawn area on the property at all. And also the planting in the parking area is all native vegetation. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, you gotta just switch it on top.
On top.
Okay, there we go. Will the homeowner maintain the native vegetation because the invasives will just turn around and reinvade?
Yes. Yep. There will be a plan to maintain that.
Commissioner Neely? Thank you. Has this been through conservation as far as the plantings and proximity to the Mill River?
I know that Conservation reviewed the determination that they didn't have any jurisdiction. The plan was sent to Hartford to the Connecticut DEEP, and they reviewed it, and I don't believe they had any comments on the proposed planting. That the tidal area falls into the state's jurisdiction.
And the state didn't, the state has reviewed it?
That's my understanding, with through Joe Biankowski's review of coastal site plan approval.
How would we know that?
The staff report will go through that. Yeah, but we actually went to wetlands, went through the whole determination process. Once they determined it was tidal wetlands, they acknowledged in writing that it wasn't subject to their jurisdiction. However, it still was subject to a jurisdiction with regard to a CAM application, which was prepared by Mr. Kenny and submitted.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. Couple housekeeping things. Property serviced by city sewer, public water. Neil Jane, our engineer, is here if you would like us to take you through the hydrology of the drainage and everything else. But if you can see, there was an email today that went to Jim Went, which is from Laura Pulley, which says, Jim, I've received the revised drainage report and drainage plan. The report indicates that adequate stormwater attenuation and groundwater recharge is now provided for the 100-year storm. A high-level overflow pipe is also provided with outlet protection. All catch basins should have 3-foot sumps with siphon hoods on the outlet pipes. The plan is therefore acceptable. We would agree to a condition of approval that any catch basins shall have 3-foot sumps with siphon hoods on the outlet pipes, which is a recommendation from your town engineer. I don't know to what other further extent you would like Mr. Jane to talk about the drainage, but I think it's been thoroughly reviewed by your engineering department, and the drainage report has been submitted, has been approved, and we believe we satisfy the zoning requirement that the property be engineered appropriately. I'd be happy to have, if there's any specific questions Neil has with regard to the drainage and the recharge, he'd be here to answer that, but as I said, that's already been hashed out through Laura Pulley.
Francis?
Was there a note, was there a note on that today's plan submittal about it can handle 2 100-year storms? Is that what I saw?
No, for 100-year storm.
A 100-year.
Yeah, 100-year storm, which is what
Okay.
Laura Pulley, requires
That's what
in
she
looking at these
wanted.
applications.
Looking at this handout today, I'm not sure if this is related or not, but what does this hashed area refer to? The hash marks there? Is that part of the drainage?
No, I believe, and I'll check with Neil, but it should be the anti-tracking pads that are kind of...
Yeah, that's the anti-tracking.
All anti-tracking pads that are installed during installation, so when construction stuff's comes in and out, they require a tracking pad so that you're not... It's basically gravel so that the dirt comes up the tree, the tires before it heads out onto the street.
Thanks.
Commissioner Barrett?
Mr. Rizzio?
Yes.
I was just going through the code enforcement minutes, and under Town Plan and Zoning, Section 2810 states that all off-street parking and loading spaces should maintain a minimum setback of 10 feet from the street line. So is that last space there the one you're not asking us to waive? Is that 10 feet from the street line?
Space.
Top right.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of how to address your comment, not that I have, if you can give me a minute to talk to the engineer about it.
We have like kind of definition of what illegal space is and what's not, and how wide they
Correct.
have to be, and how they have to be striped and that stuff. And one of them says you can't have a parking space like right on the street line. It looks like you're asking us to waive the one on the left, which is in the middle of the access driveway. I understand the argument about the mixed use, residential.
Correct.
I understand that. I'm saying the one on the other side, isn't it right near the street line?
I have to check the regulation, but I'm pretty sure you, I mean, I'm just thinking without going through the regulation, and maybe on rebuttal, because I assume there'll be some comments. I'll reserve the right to discuss that, but I would, God, I gotta tell you, I think of every parking lot that I have in town, and their parking spaces are a lot closer than 10 feet to the street line. But that doesn't mean it's right, and I will address that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Jacobs.
I'm assuming that what are the hours going to be for the commercial? Are there going to be stores or office?
No, it's office.
Office. And the lighting, there'll be no night light, the lighting plan will be dark sky lighting?
The lighting, I'll Bill Kenny come up.
Bill Kenny again. We did submit a lighting plan, and there's two pole-mounted light fixtures, as well as that's in the parking area landward of the building.
Yeah, I did see the lighting plan, but I just wasn't clear on how it was going to... It's going to be dark sky lighting, it's going to reflect down?
Yes, you won't.
Okay.
The luminaire won't be visible. It'll be within the fixture.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the pavement is going to be semi-permeable?
Bituminous.
Bituminous, yes. Okay. And have you talked with the neighbors about any concerns they might have, or?
I have not been contacted by any neighbors. My client, I understand, talked to the neighbor next door. I don't know if the position that he relayed to me may be the position that the neighbor's taking, but I know, my understanding is there's been discussions with the neighbor next door. Given, I don't know what the position of the neighbor is. They were sent letters. No one's contacted my office, except I spoke to Attorney Green this afternoon.
Okay.
But I received no calls from any neighbors with regard to this application.
And you're going to submit a separate sign application, I'm assuming?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
There's in the CPD notes, there's also a question about 28.10.1. Describe how the under building parking spaces are compliant with 28.10.1 regarding an enclosure.
I'll address that also. My understanding, it was addressed when they did the plans, that it was compliant, but I'll give you the reason why it is or why it is.
Yeah. Come on. There's another note in paragraph 4 about parallel parking required spaces are 9 by 20. Are these 9 by 20?
These are, the parallel spaces here are 9 by 20. Parallel spaces underneath, which are, direct entry, are 9 by 18, which is consistent, yes.
That's head-in.
What's that?
Underneath is head-in parking?
Correct. Head-in parking is 9 by 18. Parallel is 9 by 20, which is, these are and it's noted on the site plan. All right. Well, if you'll indulge me, I will take you through, in kind of summary. I love Attorney Green, but I kind of figure he's not here to support my application, so if you'll indulge me to establish a record and go through the requirements for approval. It may take us through a couple minutes, but it's something I feel it's important to establish. Pursuant to your special permit, it's very clear with regard to section 25.7 that there's requirements of approval. Those requirements of approval are very specific. Remember, this is not a special exception, it's a special permit. Under 25.7.1, the proposed use shall be permitted in the district in which it is to be located, clearly pursuant to your regulations. Both the office and the residential, as long as it's not on the ground floor, are permitted uses and are here without the without any use variances or any other type of variances with regard to its use. The site plan shall include the location, arrangement of buildings and other structures, signs and outdoor illumination in the existing proposed contours, streets, driveways, off-street parking, loading spaces, sidewalks, storm drainage, sewage disposal facilities to meet the requirements of section 25.77. We believe that we meet all those. We will address two of the concerns the commission had with regard to 10 feet from the street line and section 28.10.1 with regard to the covered parking. I'll reserve comment for that for my rebuttal if that's permissible with the commission. With regard to storm drainage, with regard to sewage disposal, with regard to off-street requirements and loading spaces, I believe we satisfy all the requirements. The new town engineer has commented with regard to the engineering of this project as relates to storm facilities and sewage disposal. Architectural plans and buildings and signs shall include exterior building, material colors, elevations, roof line height and bulk. Those have all been submitted to you. What I can do is spend a couple minutes to take you through them. Mark Andre, our local architect, is here to take to all, if you have any specific questions. But basically, I'll go back to the floor plans. This is the proposed elevations. This is the elevation that looks to the east. So basically, this will be the elevation that looks out towards the water, which will be in effect away from the commercial building. And I'll take you through the materials in just a minute. But basically, a clapboard look. And I can have Mark explain to you the colonial nature that he thought of it by also bringing in the nautical component, and he does that basically with roof lines and pergolas and the nice roof concept. Basically, this is to be the property if it's looking out toward the south elevation. Lots of windows, taking advantage as much as you can of your water views. This is the design as relates against the commercial property. The windows are small, but they're really, we've got about a 15-foot difference between our side setback, 14-foot difference between our side setback and a building next door. The building next door has not been very well maintained. It is not something that we wish to enjoy the view of. And from a personal residence, we really don't want to see windows going from offices directly into a residential component. And then this is the building as it will be looking toward Sasco Hill. So as you'll come in, this is an elevator shaft. The height requirements are all met. This is a decorative top to the workings of the elevator shaft, which stays below the roof line and is permitted there pursuant to your regulations. Basically, this is to the ridge line. With regard to the floor plan is pretty straightforward. you never really know the true floor plan or configuration of an office. Basically, we do have 3,250 square feet of office that sits above a parking garage, which has the elevator and the underground parking. We believe that, as you see, we sold this for the residential. Obviously, the residents are going to will use the covered parking if they can, if it's available when the office is not there. But in any event, at least one residential space will be reserved for, one space will be reserved for the residential use, which would still put us fully compliant with your zoning regulations. Second floor will be 3,250 square feet of open space office. It's currently intended for just one user. As we know, it's typically could be broken up depending on tenants, but our intention is basically our client to use it as an office for his company, which he has a very successful construction company. He's built a ton of homes in town, and when we say construction, it's not with regard to any equipment or anything else. We're basically a back office. Second floor above the commercial space, and make it that easy, which is not the ground floor, will be a very open floor plan, a lot of windows, and some decking to take advantage of the views. And then the third floor will have basically a loft area, which will be about 300 feet, with the ability to put gardens and light amenities on top.
Are there mechanicals on that level?
What's that?
Are there mechanicals on that level?
The mechanicals will be on that level, is that correct? Yes, Mark.
Are they set back from the edge, one by two, 1 foot for each 2 foot height?
Well, the mechanicals are not on the roof.
They're not?
No.
That's what I just asked.
They're housed. They're in the loft area. They're housed in the loft area.
Housed.
Yeah, so there's no, yeah, exactly.
Can't see them from the street?
No.
They're set back and they're enclosed?
Correct. Last but not least, materials. As this is in your plan, talks about an AZAC board, clapboard, talks about beaded, talks about rooftop mechanical equipment, but that is all enclosed and will not be visible from the street. It talks about a glazed curtain wall, windows, pergola, and standing seam metal roof. This railing, which will be on the second floor, and whitewashed brick columns. Mark, if you can just come up for one quick second, explain how you try to address the colonial type requirement that in the nautical theme and the elements of a colonial nature.
My name is Mark Andre. I'm the architect for 54 Sasco Hill. Basically, my inspiration for this building came from the surrounding building on Sasco Hill. I've done a lot of traditional homes, a lot of single-family home in the flooded area. This project, the lot is also subject to a FEMA requirement, so the building is elevated to provide parking. And the use of the materials are very common in the area. The cardboard materials that we're using to skin the exterior. At the gable end, we're using board and batten. And then to soften the balconies areas, we're using pergolas that are very residential touches that we wanted to add to this mixed-use component of this project. I think there was an issue that arose about the parking. The columns that support in the building, they're actually not part of the parking spaces. So the 9 by 18?
Yes,
the 9 by 18, that's exclusive of these, the supporting pillars for the building. And then along the property line between the residential neighbor, we're providing short retaining wall, about 2 feet. We'll be faced with the same whitewash brick that we're using for the exterior, and we're gonna cap the top with almost kind of like a split rail fence that's gonna have a little gap, and that will also try to block any headlight, let's say around 5 o'clock, like this time, when the users of the office space, they'll live in the property.
That fence is going to block headlights?
Well, they're very close. At least it will diffuse it a little bit instead of having nothing there.
And the pergola, what material are you using to make that pergola?
The pergola, the materials that we're using for this building, they're very durable, just like the brick, the AZEC, which is composite. The pergola will be made out of the same material. There will be AZEC materials. And then for the railings, we're using cable rails with AZEC columns. And then for the roofing materials, we were thinking of using a standing seam at the top. Any other question, I'll be more than happy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Andre, just briefly, it's hard for me to see on the plan, but how is the waste disposal taken care of in terms of the dumpster and screening and all that? Can you show me? I apologize. I'm only looking at the small drawing, so it's a little tough for me.
Between space number 6 and number 7, there's an enclosed area for the waste disposal.
And that is all part of the...
That's completely enclosed.
Enclosed, okay.
Yes.
Is that where those the doors, the swing doors are?
That's correct.
Oh, it says dumpster.
Dumpster and refuse.
That's a good question.
So what you're saying is the truck has to go down the driveway, pick up the container, right, load it in, I would assume, and then back out to Sasco Hill Road to get out?
I would assume so. We cannot put the dumpster at the curb.
No, well, we really don't like trucks backing into Sasco Hill Road either.
I would think they do it in most homes. I know I live on the Old Post Road, and my garbage truck backs in, drives in, backs out. And that happens every Friday morning if anybody wants to know it.
No, but that's it, and it's not a question of, efficacy at this point. That's the plan.
Correct.
The plan is that the dumpsters are contained in that enclosure.
Correct.
And the dumpster truck is going to come in, pick it up, and back out.
Yeah, my gut instinct is they could also get a smaller, there could also be a smaller garbage truck. You'd have to, whatever they, or, what's that?
They have rollout dumpsters.
Yes. I don't see that refuse in this situation is going to be any different than you see on, they have to make accommodations. I don't necessarily know, I don't see that being an issue. I believe that it's a once-a-week thing. They do it the mornings to address it, and you have that in many commercial properties where there's, where not everyone has a turning radius for a garage, a full-size garbage truck.
In regards to, we're going to have like an owner-operator, I guess, in the commercial part of it. And in the residential, we're looking at rentals?
No.
We're selling?
The owner's looking to live there, establish it as a
It'll be like a condo?
Yeah, correct.
And we're going to have, I guess, an association that's going to maintain the building based on the, how many residential units are we looking for?
There's only one unit.
Only one unit?
It can only be one unit.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about it being split. The only way to be able to split would end up at the ZBA, because remember, our parking requirement with regard to residential is driven by the unit number, not the square footage. So
I guess my question is, how are the two going to be responsible for maintaining the whole property? You know what I'm saying?
As delicately as possible.
Yeah.
It's not really a zoning issue, it's kind of an ownership issue.
No, I understand.
So our plan is that the owner-operator is going to be there, he's going to live above it, work below it. That can mean nothing tomorrow, where the ability is for somebody to separately own each unit. They could be treated as individual ownership, where somebody rents out both the residential unit and the office, and they could also be condominiumized and have separate ownership.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
All irrelevant as relates to zoning.
So as a residential, we should treat this as a condominium?
I couldn't commit to that. I mean, his intent is not to sell the units. His intent is to retain both the office and the, and I'll give you a good example of that so that you understand. I was involved with the project on Sherman Street. The project on Sherman Street has a first floor that is commercial. It has a second and third floor that is residential.
They're condominiums. There's 5 of them. There could be technically 10 of them. In other words, the office on the first floor, although it's only 600 square feet, not as relates to zoning, but as relates to ownership, could independently be condominiumized and rented to a second unit. So zoning always relates as to use. Very difficult to ever determine ownership, whether it ever became a co-op, whether it ever became a condominium. All that we know is,
It's residential.
for certain though, which is different, is because of the parking requirements, you'll never have more than 1 residential unit above the commercial space, because we need 2 parking spaces per residential unit with the ability to waive 1 of them. So we cannot, we won't be able to, we're not going to be able to split that into multiple units, because 2 parking spaces would chase every unit that was created. So in other words, we couldn't make 2 1,500 square foot 2 1,500 square foot residential units up top.
Right.
It's 1 unit.
So we just, I guess, the rest of the property can be considered common area, let's say, between the 2.
The common area between the 2 will be everything on the ground.
Right.
Everything else will be self-contained. There's an elevator, and the only other common areas would be the elevator and the staircases. And as relates to when we talk about the garbage truck coming in and out, we also had that, this has been reviewed by the fire department and went through the whole process, and they didn't have an issue with it also. I can tell you there's no turning radius for a fire truck to get in and out of there. So I kind of relate the fire truck emergency services to the garbage truck, which is they happen maybe regularly, but they don't happen frequently, and they have direct and clear access in and out of the site and to the area which they need to address. Yes?
Commissioner Neely?
Give me that thing. The print is rather small, so it's hard to determine. What is the square footage of the building, the total square footage of the building?
Total square footage will be 7,000, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna get my glasses on, so I'm 100%. 7,064 square feet, which encompasses 3,250 square feet of commercial space on the first floor, 2,800 and, we got the exact numbers for you. 2,800, I have the exact, 2,849 square feet above the commercial space, and a loft area of 327 square feet.
And what is the size of the lot, building lot itself?
Size of the building lot is 11,786 square feet. Now, just as a note, when you put that in context, because it sounds like 7,000 square feet's a lot of square footage, except when you realize it's in a DCD zone, and you can have 150%. So technically, floor area-wise, however we decided to fit it, if we could fit it, I mean, you would be able to fit basically 16,000 square feet and not be in violation of your floor area requirement. You could also go as far as just general coverage area, you'd be able to go to 75%, and we're at 30%. So, and that's one of, and the reminder in this application, and I know it's, and I guess to give you a better feel for this, what I did was I physically kind of blew up a zoning map to give you a feel for exactly where this is, that it is a commercial district with an address on Sasco Hill Road. Maybe should have a little bit of an asterisk, because I think it comes falls into a whole different category. I'm sorry, so I think that's just important to note. We also met with, and I'll, you know what? Let me finish up. I'll go through any other questions.
How does it compare with the building that's on the corner of Sasco Road?
Building on the corner's 16 or 17,000 square feet. What I did was, I brought if you'd like. I also have the assessor card for that in case anybody wanted to challenge that. But what I looked at it was it's 0.8 acres. So it's a little more than double the size, and it's about 16,000. I thought I said 16,254 square feet. So they're similar.
Coming around to about 3 minutes remaining.
3 minutes remaining. Well, then you know what I'll do? I'm going to work very quickly through these last requirements, and then I'm sure somebody will want to comment at the next hearing if this gets continued.
Well, I would really like to close applicant's presentation.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. I'll close. But if you don't mind, if you can be patient with me, I'll just take you very quickly through these last numbers just to establish my record. As I said, the specifications for all construction improvements within an existing local or private street shall meet or exceed the standards of subdivision. We're not a subdivision, so we don't have to worry about it. Specifications for all driveways and off-street parking spaces, we believe we've satisfied. I will address the two issues that were brought up with regard to the spaces, but I think Mark addressed the space with regard to a below-grade covered parking, is that the pillars are not part or located within our parking space.
Yeah, my question that you were going to respond to on rebuttal was 28.10.1,
Yes.
which requires...
I'll get back to that, yep.
Right.
I will do that. Okay. Balance may grant a special permit for establishment. We're not looking for establishing any use of a lot. As I said, our lot's legally pre-existing non-conforming. The development shown on the site and architectural plans be of such character as to harmonize with the neighborhood to accomplish a transition in character between the areas of unlike character, protect property values in the neighborhood, and to preserve and enhance the appearance and beauty of the community, and to avoid undue traffic congestion. We believe we do that in effect that we're transitioning from a purely commercial nature on the corner to a mixed use to residential for the balance of Sasco Hill Road. We believe we actually help create that transition from the strictly commercial use. The architectural design shall be in conformance with the purpose and intent of any plan of development adopted by the town. We believe we've done that and that we've created a project that in effect takes care of our FEMA issues, corrects the non-conforming FEMA portions of the property, and yet has an aesthetically pleasing look, nautical in nature with colonial contents and colonial aspects. For all those reasons, I believe we satisfy the requirements of approval for a special exception under Section 20, a special permit under Section 25.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any objection to the commissioners walking the lot?
Not at all. Oh, can I ask one other thing? I also have a letter from the economic development.
We have that.
We have that.
We got that.
I didn't know if you
They make copies for all. Everybody should have that from Mark Barnhart.
I'd like to hand in every chance I get to hand in something that supports my application, I got to put it in.
Anything further?
I think that there will be. I'm sure there'll be much further, but in order to conclude the initial presentation, I think we're pretty much done, and we'll address your concerns at the next hearing.
Very good. I'll close the applicant portion of the public hearing. The public will have an opportunity to comment at the opening of the public hearing next session.
Next hearing will be